Next thing you know, we can be doing equestrian, synchronized swimming, water polo, hockey. I don't know about hockey. I mean, there's a couple of bruhs play hockey, but I don't know if they're gonna let some real bruhs play hockey, like Nuck Nuck and, you know, Pojo them. I don't know if they're gonna. Hockey? Because you get to fight. You know, in hockey, they just let you fight. Come on now.
Research about sports besides American football has lagged when it comes to the degenerative brain disease known as CTE. Now, the authors of a new study out today say theirs is the first to show that the longer an athlete played ice hockey, the more likely they were to develop the disease. NPR's Becky Sullivan reports.
CTE, or chronic traumatic encephalopathy, can only be diagnosed after death. That means researchers rely on donations of brains from athletes who have died.
Most of what we've learned has been in the football space because most of our brain donors have been football players.
This is Dr. Jesse Mez, a neurologist at Boston University and co-author of the new study in the medical journal JAMA Network Open. He and his colleagues took a look at the brains of 77 male ice hockey players. Of those who only played at the youth or high school level, about 10% had CTE. That number jumped to 96% for professional players.
We found that with each additional year of play, the odds of having CTE increased by 34%.
Now, that's not to say that most NHL players will develop CTE. That's impossible to know because researchers can only look at donated brains. Families may be more motivated to sign up if they think they've seen signs of cognitive decline in their loved ones.
And that suggests that we're going to have more people with CTE in the brain bank than we would in the general population.
From a player safety standpoint, hockey is different from other sports. You're playing on a hard surface, obviously, ice, and at the edge of the field of play are more hard surfaces, the boards, the glass. Players collide all the time with the boards and the ice and the other players, and all of those impacts add up over time. Dr. Michael Stewart is the chief medical officer for USA Hockey and a consultant for the NHL Players Association.
We need to eliminate the dangerous events, including hits to the head, checking from behind, charging, and boarding.
He'd like to see the NHL ban fighting, too, but Stewart's focus is bigger than the pros. There are more than 800,000 kids in youth hockey across the U.S. and Canada. Keeping them safe is huge, he says, so kids can reap all of the benefits that come from playing youth sports, like better mental health and social skills, such as teamwork. About a decade ago, USA Hockey banned body checking for boys younger than 13, and for older kids enacted strict penalties for aggressive hits.
And you've seen the same progress, I think, in sports like American football, where you can no longer hit a receiver, for example, who is unsuspecting. Same thing in hockey.
One guy who's lived through the changes in this sport is Kerry Goulet. He played as a pro in Germany for 16 years. He told me about one hit he took that set him back for weeks.
My head bounced off the boards and down I went, like in the Bugs Bunny movie with the coyote. I was laying on the ice, knocked out.
This was in the 1990s. Back then, he says, the physical trainer would just ask a couple questions, then clear you to play.
How many fingers? We all knew it was 2. And where are you? And all of a sudden, a guy skates by with a hockey stick. I'm at an ice hockey game, and I didn't miss a shift.
After he retired, Goulet co-founded an organization called Stop Concussions. Now, in his 60s, he travels globally to educate players and officials at all levels of hockey.
I think we've done a better job. I don't think we're where we need to be yet.
In his career, Goulet had 3 diagnosed concussions. The real number was maybe more like 20, he thinks. Since then, he's dealt with depression and even some suicidal thoughts. Those can be signs of CTE, though it's not a guarantee. The only way to know for sure is to have researchers take a look at his brain after he dies. So he's pledged to donate when the time comes. Becky Sullivan, NPR News.
People were sharing helmets because we were lied to, saying that we had equipment on the way.
Shireen had to wear his helmet that he had in high school that I bought him. That I know it wasn't registered and it wasn't a certified helmet for this season.
And his helmet comes off. I can't believe this happened again.
We're players sharing helmets, yes.
Is that dangerous?
Football is dangerous. Yeah.
It's
time for Science and Medicine, a collaboration between TPR and the UT Health Science Center, San Antonio, where scientific discovery advances how medicine is practiced everywhere. I'm Buddy Petrie. CTE, chronic traumatic encephalopathy, is a rare neurodegenerative disease that develops in people who have many years of hits to the head. So football players, but also rodeo riders or soldiers, or even someone who has experienced years of intimate partner violence. Dr. Jeremy Tanner is an assistant professor of neurology at the Biggs Institute for Alzheimer's and Neurodegenerative Diseases. He says CTE can be difficult to live with.
There can be difficulties with impulse control, having a short fuse, irritability, anger, explosive outbursts, and then also with cognitive symptoms.
But right now, there is no way to definitively diagnose CTE until a person has died. Tanner hopes to change that and will lead the San Antonio arm of a multi-year study involving former college and professional football players.
That's the goal, is to be able to diagnose it during life, whether it's using an MRI and looking for certain imaging features, whether it's using a clinical exam or cognitive testing and finding certain patterns that help us to identify when it's present, or testing some of the new blood-based biomarkers and using that to guide future tests.
Because early intervention can make a difference.
We don't yet have a way to stop the disease. We don't have a way to slow the disease, but we have a way to help with the symptoms of the disease. And our hope is in the future to be able to slow, stop, and prevent the disease. But the first step is understanding it and diagnosing it.
That's Science and Medicine from the UT Health Science Center, San Antonio, and Texas Public Radio. I'm Bonnie Petrie.
Now keep in mind that I'm an artist, and I'm sensitive about my shit.
This is St. Louis Public Radio. Richard Hunt was a prolific black sculptor from Chicago who died last December. He used his art to express grief, racial trauma, and liberation. His abstract metal creations are on display at the Abraham Lincoln Presidential Museum in Springfield. Mawa Iqbal spent a day at the exhibit with Hunt's biographer and close friend, John Ott. The music you will hear is composed by Randy Irwin. It's inspired by what Hunt would listen to while sculpting.
At the opening of the exhibition is a somber, reflective moment to see one of Hunt's first welded sculptures. Hero's Head is a depiction in sculptural form of the lynched body of Emmett Till that Richard saw in the funeral in 1955 that he attended with his family. This was attended by thousands and thousands of people on the south side of Chicago. Emmett Till became a spark of the civil rights movement, and very important also within the context of Richard's finding himself his own aim and direction as his artistic practice. The sculpture is a little smaller than life size. It was of a 14-year-old Emmett, but the sculpture recounts in somewhat abstracted form the horrible tragedy that this lynching had on Emmett Till's head. A crushed face, a missing eyeball, a cracked skull. One of the largest sculptures in the exhibition is From the Sea, which was commissioned by McDonald's Corporation from Hunt in 1983. That was the year that Ronald Reagan finally passed a federal holiday for Martin Luther King Jr. This particular sculpture, of nearly 6 foot tall and just as wide, represents crashing waves of the Red Sea. And you can see through the overarching waves that look quite menacing as they're crashing down the path and the opening of the Red Sea created by Moses to help the Israelites escape. This particular moment was captured in a speech by Martin Luther King Jr. in his 1956 sermon, which was titled The Death of Evil Upon the Seashore. And in that particular speech, King said, and I quote here, "There is a Red Sea in history that ultimately comes to carry the forces of goodness to victory. And that same Red Sea closes in to bring doom and destruction to the forces of evil." As we leave the exhibition, one of the more poignant pieces is the maquette for Hero Ascending, recalling back to Hunt's origin story, really the origin of his artistic life and practice, having seen Emmett, and then now at the end of his life, having been commissioned to build a sculptural monument to Emmett himself. And you can see the forms of wings, you can see the uplift throughout the sculpture, where he ultimately aimed his life's work was this idea of freedom and growth. And this was his reaction after processing the trauma of Emmett Till, that he would spend the rest of his life dedicating his sculptural practice to the highest achievements of Black Americans as well as people all across the world, which is the desire for freedom.
John Ott, a biographer and longtime friend of the Chicago sculptor Richard Hunt. That piece was produced by Mawa Iqbal.
Let me say something that gets to the very crux of the matter, and this may be offensive for some to hear who are not on the side that we're on. White people, we have been the problem for 400 years.
Say that again.
Let me say it one more time for those of you who didn't hear me. White people, we have been the problem for 400 years.
Miami Beach hosts Art Basel this week, an annual event that attracts collectors, gallery owners, and other art aficionados. That's not all, though. NPR's Greg Allen says there's also public art on display that attracts locals.
On Miami Beach, the water is blue, there's a cruise ship in the distance, and rising from the sand next to the Faena Hotel are the sails of a buried Spanish galleon. It's an art installation. The person who created it, Nicholas Galanin, is a long way from his home in Sitka, Alaska.
I'm Tlingit Unanga. My Tlingit name is Yech Yatsin.
Galanin grew up in a native Alaskan community where traditional arts like wood carving and jewelry making are treasured. He says he was essentially born into the arts.
So my great-grandfather was a totem carver. My father was an artist, a jeweler, and a musician, a mentor of mine. My uncle was a mentor and artist, a totem carver, canoe maker, jeweler. So I've been immersed since a young age.
Galanin's art blends traditional techniques like jewelry making and wood carving with sculpture, photography, and multimedia effects. It's taken him worldwide with exhibitions in Australia, Italy, and an upcoming public art event in the United Arab Emirates. But he says it's important for him to stay connected with his community in Alaska.
I'm trained as a carver in my community. I've led dugout canoe projects. We recently raised a 27-foot totem pole, a kutia, we call it, in Juneau.
Galanin says his totem was carved in response to a statue that had been unveiled at the Capitol building in Juneau. It was of William Seward, the Secretary of State who negotiated Russia's sale of Alaska to the U.S. It was a sale, Galanin says, that was done without any consideration for the native people who lived there.
A lot of my work investigates land and history and indigenous sovereignty, indigenous rights, language.
On Miami Beach, Galanin's piece recalls Spanish conquistador Hernan Cortez, who ordered his ship sunk after landing in Mexico in the early 1500s. The hull of the ship appears buried in the sand. Twin masts, 40 feet high, tower over the beach.
And these were the first things that were documented and still orally passed on in our communities that were seen from the horizon, was these sails like coming in, right?
On Galanin's sails, there's writing in Spanish and English. It raises questions about colonialism, the environment, and the role those who see it have in shaping the future. On a prominent location on Miami Beach, Galanin's ship is getting a lot of attention.
So what's a pirate ship doing on Miami Beach?
Michael Davidson Schmick was surprised when he came on it. He and his wife Louise are Miami locals. Louise says they actually came to see another public art installation several hundred yards up the beach, the Great Elephant Migration.
The elephants are amazing. They're made by artisans in India, I guess, indigenous people, to kind of highlight environmental or sustainability kind of issues. And I guess they're all models of actual elephants in the wild that the people observed and knew and made replicas of.
The elephants are made from an invasive weed found in India's forests. The project is a fundraising effort supporting conservation groups that's traveling across the country. The reception here has been especially enthusiastic. So much so that the Miami Herald reports a security guard had to oust a couple he found after hours engaged in amorous activity on top of one of the elephants. Greg Allen, NPR News, Miami Beach.
I'm getting in the elevator, and these two high school white boys tried to get on with me. And I just dove off. I said, y'all ain't killing me. I am scared of young white boys. If you white and under 21, I am running for the hills. What the hell is wrong with these white kids shooting up the school?
KC students arrested for terroristic threats against teacher. They're back in class. The words at the top of incident report, filled out by Kansas City police, are the kind no school wants to see. Terrorist threats. At Kansas City's Pembroke Hill School, it is the unclear nature of those threats, leveled in September against a newly hired African-American teacher and reportedly made by 3 middle school students, that continue to fill faculty and parents at the Tony Private School with questions, concerns and consternation 2 months later. Were the threats racial? Physical? The chief concern is why 2 of the offending students, all of whom were reportedly put in handcuffs on September 25 and taken by police from the $30,000 per year school, were allowed to return after a suspension. 1 student did not return, although it remains unclear if the student did not return voluntarily or if the student was expelled. I cannot believe the way it was handled, said a longtime Pembroke parent who didn't want her name used out of concern that her criticism of the school would lead to recriminations against her children. When did it become okay to threaten a teacher? I think it's sickening, the parent continued. The kids are concerned because they saw their classmates getting arrested. They handcuffed them. They took them away in cars. They're upset for the teacher. Then when the kids come back, people are freaked out because they don't want to be around the kids. They don't know if they're safe at school. 2 threatening incidents. The lack of detailed information passed on to students and parents, she said, has been frustrating. Also galling, she added, is that one of the offending students is the child of a Pembroke board member. It's unacceptable, she said, that your privilege puts you on a board and then you use that privilege to get your kid out of a situation he shouldn't be out of. The police incident report, obtained by the Star, offers almost no useful information as to the nature of the threats, except to say they occurred. Police officer King and I were working in an off-duty capacity at Pembroke Hill School District and were made aware of a threat to a teacher, the incident report reads. Because the individuals involved are juveniles, their names and the details of what happened have been redacted, meaning obscured from sight. The Star's policy also is to not publish the names of children accused of or charged with crimes, even if they are known, unless they are charged as adults. No charges were filed. The 2 students are no longer in the teacher's class. Pembroke administrators declined to speak to the Star directly, but in answers to emailed questions they acknowledged that 2 incidents actually occurred in relation to the faculty member who was identified as Christy D. Jones in the police incident report. Jones declined to speak on the record to the Star. Jones, who has been a teacher for 20 years, started instructing 7th grade English at Pembroke in May. Pembroke acknowledged that the first threat, by 1 middle school student, occurred in early September. The threat was reported to the school and we initiated our standard process of threat assessment and investigation which resulted in notification of the Kansas City Police Department, the school wrote to the Star. The police department visited the student's family at their home and the matter was cleared from a law enforcement perspective. The student subsequently served a long-term suspension. Disturbed by the threat, Jones reportedly took a leave of absence from the school for several weeks. Before Jones was scheduled to return, the school was made aware of a second set of threats shared on a text thread among several middle school students. No charges. The police incident report says that occurred on September 25 at 3 p.m. The school evaluated the threat using our standard process of threat assessment and then contacted the off-duty Kansas City Police Department officers on campus at the time, the school said. The matter was turned over to the police department for investigation and no charges were filed. Pembroke administrators said the school conducted a comprehensive and thorough investigation into the matter and students were disciplined accordingly. 1 student did not return, although it was not clear if the student did not return voluntarily or if the student was expelled. The others returned after long-term suspensions, the administrators said. The school added that at Pembroke any threat is taken extremely seriously. Asked if the fact that 1 student was the child of a board member played a role in the decision to allow that student to return to the school, Pembroke administrators responded, no. Asked whether the school did anything to assure the community of parents of the actions the school had taken, such as hold an assembly or send an email or letter, the school said it did not. The school's general policy, Pembroke responded, is not to announce disciplinary action taken against individual students. However, the school has engaged in many conversations with individual parents who have asked questions or expressed concerns about what happened in September. Given the results of our investigation, that there were no charges brought, that there were juveniles involved, And out of respect for the privacy and dignity of the students and the faculty member, there has not been a broad communication to all parents.
Medical apartheid. The dark history of medical experimentation on Black Americans from colonial times to the present.
The woman at the center of a landmark lawsuit on reproductive rights has died. Dolores Madrigal was 39 years old in the early 1970s when she was sterilized by the doctors who had just delivered her baby. She only later realized what had happened and became the lead plaintiff in a class action lawsuit with 10 other Mexican-American women who said they were coerced into having their tubes tied. NPR's Adrian Florido has this remembrance.
Not long after having her second son in 1973, Dolores Madrigal heard a story on the radio about women at Los Angeles' Main County Hospital. They hadn't realized doctors had tied their fallopian tubes right after delivering their babies. Madrigal rushed to the hospital to find out if it had happened to her. It had. Realizing she'd been sterilized brought Madrigal's world tumbling down.
Estaba como loca, yo tenía mucho odio, resentimiento, me pasaba llorando, no quería.
It's like I went crazy, she said in the 2015 documentary No Más Bebés. I had a lot of hate, resentment. All I did was cry. I didn't eat. I suffered so much. Soon, a couple of young Mexican-American civil rights lawyers asked her to join a class action lawsuit.
She was really enthusiastic about participating.
Virginia Espino made the documentary about Madrigal's lawsuit. The attorneys believed doctors were motivated by prejudicial views about large Mexican families and alleged they were getting women to sign sterilization consent forms that they didn't understand while they were in the throes of labor. Madrigal became lead plaintiff.
And she had a very strong belief about the injustice that was committed against her. And so she wanted to stand up against it because she felt it was wrong.
Backed by federal funds, LA's county hospital, which served poor patients, routinely performed tubal ligations. Doctors denied any women had been coerced. At a press conference in 1976, Madrigal's attorney, Antonia Hernandez, said she and the other plaintiffs were coerced.
We are suing for non-compliance or non-enforcement, non-monitoring of the sterilization regulations, also the consent forms in Spanish and at a reading level that the individual can understand.
They lost the lawsuit. The federal judge ruled that it was a communication breakdown between Spanish-speaking patients and English-speaking doctors, and that, quote, the cultural background of these particular women contributed to the problem. But the case did spark change. The government began providing Spanish-language sterilization consent forms and hired bilingual counselors for county hospitals. The ordeal scarred Dolores Madrigal and her family for life. Here's her son, Oren Madrigal.
You know, my mom wanted to have a big family, you know, like the typical old school Mexican woman, you know? Like, unfortunately, like, she tied a lot of her self-worth to her not being able to, you know, have any more babies, you know? It was a great trauma, you know? She tried to bury it.
But he says she found ways to cope and power through. Filmmaker Virginia Espino says Madrigal's legacy has been somewhat overshadowed by the mainstream women's movement's fight for reproductive and abortion rights.
Dolores Madrigal, she was robbed of her right to bear children. And so she's a historical figure in that movement for bodily autonomy that we're still fighting for today.
Madrigal died in Las Vegas last month, peacefully at the age of 90. Her son Oren called her his hero. Adrian Florido, NPR News, Los Angeles.
The Turner Diaries. Sold over 500,000 copies. Who do you think is buying it? Eric Rudolph, the Olympic bomber, Wade Page, who shut up the Sikh temple, Larry Ford, developing typhoid and cholera, William Carr with the cyanide bomb, anthrax, ricin, botulism, C4, IEDs. I could go on like this for hours, and all of them are white supremacists.
In the 1980s, a neo-Nazi violent militia recruited and operated in the remote, scenic landscape of northern Idaho. They were plotting an uprising against the government and terrorizing the Pacific Northwest.
Pull out your gun and come out with your hands up!
Firebombing a movie theater, robbing banks and armored vehicles, killing an outspoken liberal Jewish radio talk show host. That story is being told in a new thriller named after that group, The Order.
I knew very little about this movement.
That's actor Jude Law.
And obviously saw
the potential in not just starting a conversation and reflecting on this as a period piece, but also its relevance now.
He plays a veteran FBI agent trying to slow down, but instead becoming obsessed with hunting down this group. Screenwriter Zach Baylin based the film on the book The Silent Brotherhood. And as he adapted this story for film, he researched other acts of domestic terrorism too, including the 1995 bombing, where Timothy McVeigh parked a truck bomb in front of the federal building in downtown Oklahoma City.
When you go to the bombing memorial, one of the first displays is this book called The Turner Diaries, which McVeigh found some of the inspiration for his act in that book. He had been a bit of an acolyte of this guy, Bob Matthews, who also built his group on the back of having read The Turner Diaries.
Bob Matthews founded and led the order, and he took the name of his violent group directly from the 1978 novel, The Turner Diaries, where a group of white supremacists attack the Capitol, kill Congress members and staffers, all in an effort to overthrow the government. In our conversation, Baylin describes a turning point moment in the film based on true events.
There was a point where Bob Matthews attended a National Alliance convention and gave this huge speech that ended up kind of putting him on the map of white supremacy.
Will you sit back and allow the nation that our forefathers discovered, conquered, and died for be eradicated, or will you stand up like men and fight to survive?
And as I was writing it, I know that around that time Charlottesville had happened and the Unite the Right rally, and a lot of the ways in which Bob Matthews promoted his idea of racism and anti-Semitism as being something that shouldn't be hidden behind hoods anymore and could just be out in the open and normalized, I think were things that we were seeing at that time.
Yeah, we knew going in that we were dealing with a subject matter that was full of toxicity. And as Zach said, Nick Holt, who plays Bob Matthews, was the person who really had to go there.
How hard was it, Jude? I mean, you play an FBI agent named Terry Husk. If you could just describe your character and his role.
So Zach, I think, made a really smart decision early on that the special agent I play not be based directly on any of the agents who cracked this case. Husk became an amalgam. And of course, what happens is he lands in a place where the biggest case of his life is in front of him. He also became a sort of counter to Bob Matthews in that, he's equally as driven and stubborn and motivated for his cause. It's something that our director, Justin Kurzel, does very, very well, is he looks at people and unpacks them and understands them in comparison with each other and how and why maybe people act the way they do.
Zach, did you read The Turner Diaries when you were writing this screenplay?
Yeah, I did read it, and it's written almost as this children's adventure story that this group decided to put in practice, which all just seems so out of sorts.
And it's written under a pseudonym by the leader of a white nationalist group. And when it's first introduced in the film, actually, to your character, Jude, it's described as a kid's book. That's
right. Yeah, bleeding it through the piece was key. We didn't want it to be too much of a sort of breadcrumb moment, but it, similar to the agents, it was ultimately the clue that got them ahead of the group. There's also an extraordinary moment that came out of the work we were all doing as a team when Nick Holt, playing Bob Matthews, reads it to his son like a kind of bedtime tale.
See the picture?
Yeah.
That's Earl Toner.
Okay.
He's hiking up in the mountains there. He's trying to get out of the cities.
There was a couple moments where the influence over the kids became noticeable. We see Bob Matthews, the founder of the order, teaching his young son, who looks like he's maybe 5, training him to shoot a gun. Is this based on something that really happened?
Yeah, most of the scenes are very accurate. So, that a big part of what Bob provided for this group was, home and a community, and that also doubled as this very insidious training facility for his army. And I think something that we all looked at as as sort of a backbone of the film was this idea of community, and that both the law enforcement as well as the criminals that were perpetrating these crimes, in their own ways, were both trying to build the future for their families and their communities in the way that they wanted America to be represented.
Yeah, people talk about who America is for, who should be protected, who shouldn't be protected. I mean, that is at the center of this film and a central question of 2024 when it's coming out.
Absolutely.
This question is for both of you. What drew you to this story? I'll start with you, Zach, and then Jude.
I was very interested in trying to understand the resurgence of this kind of ideology in America in the last, 10 years.
For me, I read this thrilling script. Then the more we worked on it as a team, this extraordinary character arose, and I didn't feel like I'd ever really played anyone like him before. And obviously at its heart was a subject that I thought was relevant.
Actor and producer Jude Law and screenwriter Zach Balin speaking to us about their new film, The Order, out Friday.
You see, but they're very unhappy about their appearance. I think there's an article in the handout about a white woman who was in Hawaii. And she said that being around the Hawaiian people and the Asian people, and she said she was tall and white and pale. She said she felt like a freak. And so then she started getting involved in genetic science.
The gene editing technique called CRISPR has started to revolutionize medicine. But for people born with one of thousands of very rare genetic disorders, the era of CRISPR is bittersweet. That is because their disorders are too rare to attract drug companies to develop a CRISPR cure for them. NPR health correspondent Rob Stein has the story of some researchers trying to change that.
Lucy Landman was born with a very rare genetic disorder. It causes severe intellectual disability, weak muscles, often seizures, sometimes autism. Lucy's now 3. Her mom's name is Jerry.
She is expected to, very much never be able to live independently, likely never be potty trained, likely never speak. Lucy walks like she's drunk most of the time. It's hard to watch your child suffer. And Lucy does, some days, suffer a lot.
There's only a handful of kids in the world with Lucy's disorder. It's called PGAP3-CDG, and currently there's no way to treat it. In principle, CRISPR, which enables scientists to easily make very precise changes in genes, could be a godsend for Lucy. CRISPR can edit the pairs of genetic letters or bases that make up DNA.
We're lucky that both of her mutations, the one that she gets from me and the one that she gets from my husband, are what we call base editable, right? You can use CRISPR to kind of cut out the wrong base pair and put back in the right one, and that we live in 2024 when that's a legitimate possibility.
But Landman, who is also a pediatrician who lives outside San Francisco, says the disorder affects too few people to attract the millions of dollars necessary to find out.
When Lucy was diagnosed, I asked a bunch of my kind of basic science friends, who work at Genentech and all these other big companies in the Bay Area. And I said, who's kind of working on, can't we just CRISPR this? This seems like it's so feasible. And they were like, I don't know if anyone at all. It's like, no one's working on this yet, Jerry.
But then one day, Landman bumped into a guy at a farmer's market where she was trying to raise money for a foundation she started to try to change that. His name was Fyodor Urnov. Urnov works at the University of California, Berkeley, with Jennifer Doudna, who shared a Nobel Prize for helping discover CRISPR. Urnov knows CRISPR is already changing the lives of some patients with genetic disorders, but he's trying to help kids suffering from much rarer conditions.
The for-profit sector is focusing on conditions such as sickle cell disease, such as cancer, which are commercially viable because there's just enough people with them. And that leaves, frankly, 99.5% of folks outside of the big building that says, come here, be healed by CRISPR, because the commercial viability is not there, even though the technical feasibility is right in our hands.
So Ernov and scientists at other universities are trying to develop a kind of template for groups of rare conditions that are similar enough that a CRISPR treatment for one could easily be adapted for others.
We're building a set of recipes and approaches for how to switch from one disease to another and not take 4 years and 10 million to do that.
The approach from one patient to the next would be essentially identical except for the very specific genetic letters that are edited, so each case wouldn't necessarily have to go through a long, expensive approval process at the Food and Drug Administration.
The central idea is that cookbook will have been reviewed by the Food and Drug Administration. And so you can come to them, whether you are at UCLA, Seattle Children, and then say, FDA, we have a severely ill child with 4 months to live. Here is the cookbook for how to make the CRISPR on demand. We'd like to use that cookbook. And the goal is for the FDA or any other regulatory agency to say, yes, we understand. Please proceed. That's the goal.
Dr. Peter Marks, who regulates gene editing at the FDA, says it would be like approving a new shaving razor.
CRISPR is very much like a razor blade handle and a razor. Much of CRISPR, the razor blade handle part, is going to be the same over and over again. And so we just need to focus on the razor blade portion, which could be different and yet fit on that same razor.
Ernov has already started editing some of Lucy Landman's cells in his lab to show that CRISPR could help her and other kids with similar mutations. Lucy's mom is hopeful that maybe, someday, that could help her daughter.
And the question is, if we do that at age 3 or age 5 or age 7, can we cure some of the other features of her disease? You know, does she cognitively improve? Does she learn to speak in that way? That's certainly the hope.
For Lucy and millions of children around the world suffering from very rare genetic disorders. Rob Stein, NPR News.
And then I got into Memphis. And some began to say the threats, talk about the threats that were out. What would happen to me from some of our sick white brothers.
The city of Memphis says it will not accept federal oversight of its police force. That's after an investigation by the U.S. Department of Justice that found that Memphis police regularly violate people's constitutional and civil rights. NPR's Debbie Elliott reports.
Assistant Attorney General Kristen Clark with the Justice Department's Civil Rights Division says federal investigators found systemic problems in Memphis policing tactics that harm and demean people.
We found that the police in Memphis use excessive force, that they stop, search, and arrest people unlawfully, that their policies have a discriminatory effect on Black people, and that they discriminate against people with behavioral health disabilities.
The report also says police unnecessarily escalate encounters with children. The findings come after a nearly 17-month investigation into the patterns and practices of Memphis police, initiated after the brutal beating death of Black motorist Tyree Nichols after a 2023 traffic stop by a special crime task force. 3 fired officers were convicted on federal civil rights charges and 2 others pleaded guilty. They were all also Black. Memphis Mayor Paul Young says one incident of police mistreatment is too many, and the city takes the federal report seriously.
Some of the types of incidents that are described are simply not acceptable, and our hearts go out to every person who has been impacted by those actions.
But Young says Memphis is not ready to negotiate police reforms or enter into a consent decree or other binding legal agreement with the Justice Department.
It's crucial that the city has the time to do a thorough review and respond to the findings before agreeing to anything that could become a long-term financial burden to our residents and could, in fact, actually slow down our ongoing efforts to continuously improve our police department.
The acting U.S. attorney in West Tennessee, Reagan Fondren, acknowledges the city cooperated with the investigation and made changes after Tyree Nichols was killed. At the time, it fired the officers involved, released video, and dismantled the so-called Scorpion Unit tasked with combating violent crime, an ongoing struggle in Memphis. But Fondren says that's not enough to address the systemic problems uncovered.
The investigation, however, does not reveal small changes that need to be made. They are a pattern and a practice, which requires significant changes and significant investments in reform.
Civil rights activists in Memphis see the federal findings as a vindication.
I think now a lot of people will actually believe us because the Justice Department said so, but it's been happening here for such a long time.
That's local organizer Amber Sherman.
I think the main thing that folks in Memphis feel when it comes to policing is that they know when they come into contact with police that they're going to be discriminated against, that they're going to probably be brutalized, and it's probably going to be by someone who looks like them.
Sherman says restoring the public trust will require more drastic changes in Memphis policing. Debbie Elliott, NPR News.
White people kill for fun.
OpenAI is getting into the business of war. The developer behind the AI chatbot ChatGPT has announced a new deal with Anduril, a defense company that specializes in drones and anti-drone defense systems. It's a big and potentially lucrative change for the AI developer, and it could signal deeper ties between the tech industry and the U.S. Department of Defense. Our reporter Deepa Seetharaman has been covering this story. She joins us now. And we should note before we get into it, News Corp, owner of the Wall Street Journal, has a content licensing partnership with OpenAI. Deepa, what do we know about the deal between OpenAI and Anduril?
At a high level, what we know is that OpenAI is allowing Anduril to use its technology in the company's defensive tools, so like counter drones and things like that. And very explicitly, the companies will not allow the OpenAI technology to be used in combat weapons, but that's kind of it. We don't know how much money is changing hands. We don't know where this technology might be deployed. We don't know all the ins and outs and in what manner it might be deployed. These are things that we've asked the company, but we're told that it was too sensitive to answer.
When you say using OpenAI's tech in Anduril's defensive tools, what exactly do you mean?
So our understanding now is that OpenAI's AI technology, so these are models like the one underlying ChatGPT, they will start to incorporate that technology into the software that Anduril has built to maintain its counter-drone systems. These are systems that detect and assess and track drones. And if they spot a threatening drone, then what happens is the military or whoever the Anduril customers are can use electronic jamming, drones, and other means to take it down. And the idea here and the hope here is that these AI systems can improve the accuracy and speed at which Anduril systems can detect and respond to drones. And the idea being that that minimizes casualties among U.S. troops.
So this is kind of a big shift because previously OpenAI explicitly barred its technology from being used for military and warfare purposes. Why are they changing their stance now?
Yeah, so this has been an ongoing process for the last year. They had initially banned all kinds of military applications, including weapons. But then in January, there was a change in the company's usage policies. That the line that previously said that military and warfare usage was not allowed, that line had been removed. And the company subsequently confirmed that it was working with the Defense Department on a slew of different projects. They're exploring a lot of other partnerships with the Defense Department that really are on the defensive side or analytical side of things. Where they've drawn a red line for now is we don't want these tools to be used to explicitly kill people. If it's defense or if it's just information gathering, they're increasingly comfortable with that. And then you've really seen since the election in November, a big uptick in these types of announcements and deals across Silicon Valley. So it's not just OpenAI that's made a shift towards the Pentagon. It's the broader tech industry that's done the same.
And along those lines, now that OpenAI and Anduril have this agreement, could we see other companies follow?
Yeah, and in fact, you're seeing other companies do these kinds of deals this year. One of the things that's really picked up over the last year is this discussion broadly in the AI industry about AI companies serving as a strategic asset for the United States and bolstering national security at a time when there is rising competition in AI between the U.S. and countries like China. So the companies are trying to portray themselves as essential to the security backbone of the country. Besides OpenAI, we've seen its big partner, Microsoft, doing a lot of deals with the military. And then also Meta is now allowing the U.S. military to use its AI models, and Anthropic, which is another big AI startup that was founded by a number of OpenAI co-founders and senior executives. That company is also embracing the military and allowing its AI tools to be used through a partnership with Palantir. All these deals are such a striking contrast from 2018, which was not that long ago, when there were internal protests within Google against Project Maven, which was a project that Google was embarking on with the U.S. military. That kind of internal employee protest actually led Google to back away from those deals. But we've seen a re-engagement there too with Google. And so a few years ago, this is very difficult to imagine. And over the last few years, there's been a real transition because it allows these companies to survive and thrive potentially.
So if working on military technology becomes more common, what does this mean for the tech industry at large?
The tech companies have often been seen as global players. And the CEOs of these tech companies have often been positioned as global leaders. What is happening now is that these companies are increasingly portraying themselves as partners to the American government. Like, they're no longer just global enterprises, they are American enterprises. And we've seen signs of that change over the last couple of years, and now it's just accelerating in this past year.
That was our reporter, Deepa Seetharaman.
Yeah. You're still saying there's no profiling, but it is. It is. We're being hunted every day. It's a silent war against African American people as a whole.
The hunt is on. And you're the prey.
One of the saddest eulogies I've ever given as head of National Action Network and as a minister was that of A.J. Owens, a 35-year-old Florida mother of 4 who was killed in 2023 by her neighbor, Susan Lawrence, who shot Owens through a screen door during an escalating dispute involving Owens' children. Earlier this week, Lawrence was sentenced to 25 years in prison, 3 months after she was convicted of manslaughter for Owens' killing. Joining me now is Pamela Diaz, A.J. Owens' mother. Ms. Diaz, first of all, our thanks for you joining us this evening, and I appreciate you doing this, having gotten to know you and A.J.'s family, her children, and you. We know that no prison sentence can restore an innocent life, but I have to ask, what went through your mind when you saw that the woman who killed your daughter was sentenced to 25 years in prison?
Rev, the first thing I thought about was this death, this killing, this loss of life, my daughter losing her life, the children losing their mother, should have never happened from the get-go. But I was pleased somewhat with the sentencing in that the justice system did work, that she was held accountable for her actions, although I had hoped for the maximum, but it was a step in the right direction with the 25 years. But again, it just reiterated the fact that my daughter and the children's mom should still be here amongst us.
Now, it brings me to AJ's children, who I've gotten to meet, especially when I came to preach at the funeral, and who were the center of the tensions between the daughter and Ms. Lawrence. Can you tell us what they've expressed about the sentencing?
Israel, as we call him Izzy, he was the one that was standing with his mom when she was shot and killed. This kid is incredible. So he had a lot of questions, and I tried to be as honest as I could with them, but he was happy. Boy, the light in this boy's eyes. And he said something very powerful. He said he does not fear Susan, even if she was released sooner, because we talk about what it means to have authority over our feelings and emotions, and he will not let anyone take anything else from us. Those were his words at hearing that Susan had been sentenced for 25 years.
Izzy,
yes.
And I met him. You've come and brought him to National Action Network events after we did the funeral and helped the family. This week, you and many of AJ's loved ones announced you will launch a fund to ease financial burdens for families affected by racial violence, as yours has been. You've called it Standing in the Gap, and it will also go toward advocating for legislation to repeal Florida's Stand Your Ground law, which Lauren's legal team invoked in her defense. Our audience may remember that law, which says if someone reasonably believes they are threatened by the use of deadly force against them, they can use deadly force to defend themselves. That was the defense Zimmerman used in the Trayvon Martin case. Can you talk more about why you want to have this law repealed instead of revised?
It's an archaic law, and I feel that many racist people stand behind that law in terms of shooting people of color. There are studies out there that have shown that to be true. And in this case, Susan evoked her standing the ground law, and it took 4 days for an arrest, when clearly that wasn't the issue. My daughter, Ajika, was not trying to get inside of her home. She didn't have a weapon. She wasn't a threat. In fact, she asked Susan to come outside so that she could speak with her. So again, this is just a tool, a weapon to justify unnecessary killings. And unfortunately, it's people of color who are affected by this law.
Now, I met you at the funeral, and we had you come to National Action Network convention and headquarters a couple of times and work with other families. And you've met other families and have really done some real, I would say, partnering with them, dealing with how all of you have gone through this grief. You've started this fund, and others have started funds, none of which National Action Network is involved in the funds, but involved in the fight. How does it make you feel when you are bonding with victims' families that is similar to AJ? Does that bonding kind of, because only you and people that have experienced things like you had to literally relocate from your job to Florida to raise your grandchildren because their mother was killed. You've had other mothers and family members that have experienced that. Do you get strength by dealing with other victims' families?
Absolutely. It's a bond that we share that no one can understand. I will never be able to express my feelings or emotions with anyone as I can with other people who have, other mothers who have experienced this type of loss. Often we call each other and sometimes we just sit there in silence or we just cry. I've cried on the mother of Ahmaud Arbery's, Wanda, many times. The mother of Miss Rovan, the mother of Tyree Nichols. They have held me. We hold each other up. And this is one of the things that I guess I did have to relocate. And it was a struggle. It was something that I wasn't prepared. And this is one of the things that we're hoping that the fund will help other families in like situations, help them with relocation, help them with any type of financial burden, funeral, burial expenses. It's intended to be a rapid response, a rapid reimbursement. But again, this is a club, a sisterhood, a fatherhood, a brotherhood, a fraternity, a sorority that only those who have experienced this can truly understand it.
And you've been courageous and strong, as the other mothers and some cases fathers have been throughout this. And whatever support you get, I'm sure you're going to be telling that story along with people like Attorney Ben Crump, who was there with you, and Pastor Al Bernard. Pamela Diaz, thank you for being with us. The mother of A.J. Owens, thank you again for sharing this week with us.
That if you want ultimate expression of white supremacy and the white supremacist mentality, and you want to put it in the form of one person that I would name, and that's something I very seldom do, it would be Jeffrey Dahmer. He's the ultimate expression of white supremacy. Everything that he was doing, working in a chocolate factory, the whole 9 yards, storing black male bodies in canisters of lye and alcohol and whatnot, got them in the refrigerator, and cannibalism and all of that, and calm, very methodical. Even when questioned by the law enforcement officers, very calm. Hannibal Lecter.
Frozen femurs in the freezer. Jeffrey Dahmer.
Milwaukee's first state murder trial scheduled to start next week, now delayed.
And Maxwell Anderson is charged with killing and dismembering Sade Robinson. 12 News' Hannah Hilliard is joining us live at the Milwaukee County Courthouse right now. Hannah, the defense asked for a delay in this case.
Well, Deanna, the relatively last-minute request made here at the courthouse earlier this afternoon was pretty simple. The defense wanted to allow more time for one expert to review Maxwell Anderson's phone activity from the night of Sade Robinson's death. Maxwell Anderson walked into court Monday 1 week out from his murder trial.
Calling State of Wisconsin versus Maxwell Anderson.
But left with that trial now pushed into next year. His attorney asking to delay it.
There's a balancing act between moving it along and doing it right. And I need to do it right.
Prosecutors say Anderson was the person seen with 19-year-old Sade Robinson on a first date captured by surveillance cameras around town the night of April 1st. The next day, someone found Robinson's severed leg on the beach in Cudahy's-Warnemont Park. Her burned-out car and other body parts found close to 30th and Lisbon just days later. Prosecutors say Anderson was behind these gruesome acts.
The state is ready to proceed to trial on December 9th. The state would object to an adjournment.
But in a new court filing, criminal defense attorney Tony Cotton told the court his forensics expert discovered a potential alibi for the suspect.
Our expert believes that there is evidence on Mr. Anderson's phone that suggests that he was using the internet, presumably at his home,
during the time frame that another person would have been driving Miss Robinson's car around.
Anderson's legal team says the expert just received the full phone records Monday and would not have enough time to examine them before the start of the trial next Monday. The judge ultimately siding with the defense.
Due to this being the first time it's scheduled for trial, and in order to allow the defense to prepare properly for trial, I do want to secure the record. I do not want to create any type of issue on appeal. I am going to grant the defense's motion to adjourn.
So, Hannah, the judge gave them 6 months.
Yeah, so the new trial is now set for after Memorial Day into next year, with some procedural hearings happening between now and then. Now, late this afternoon, I was able to connect with Sade Robinson's mom. She says she is, quote, highly upset with today's decision to delay this trial. In the meantime, though, Maxwell Anderson, he does remain in custody tonight, charged with first-degree intentional homicide, mutilating a corpse, as well as arson.
Hannah Hilliard reporting live outside of the Milwaukee County Courthouse.
I'll tell you how it is down here. We'll do business with you and your women. Other than that, as far as we're concerned, you're completely off the record.
Roger Golubski is dead. The disgraced former Kansas City, Kansas police detective faced charges that would have put him behind bars for the rest of his life. He was accused of abusing women, putting innocent men in prison, and terrorizing the black community for decades. Instead, on what would have been the first day of his criminal trial on Monday, he died of an apparent suicide at the age of 71 at his home in Edwardsville, Kansas. Today, we'll hear from community members and people who have been impacted by Golubski's actions. But first, to break down what happened and unpack what this means for the Kansas City, Kansas community, Steve is joined by Peggy Lowe. She's an investigative reporter for KCUR and the host of the award-winning podcast on this saga titled Overlooked.
Before we break down what happened yesterday and its implications moving forward, tell us about the alleged crimes of Roger Golubski and what he would have been up against at his trial that was supposed to start yesterday.
Roger Golubski was arrested by the FBI 2 years ago, and he was charged with violating the civil rights of 2 specific women by rape, kidnapping, and sexual assault. He had 6 counts against him. If he had been convicted, he would have gone to prison for life. There are also 7 other victims named in the indictment, and basically prosecutors put that up to prove he had this pattern of singling out vulnerable women in the KCK community and abusing them and using them as his so-called confidential informants so that he could clear cases.
So, Peggy, walk us through your experience in the courtroom yesterday in Topeka. You were there to cover the first day of Golubski's trial. He didn't show up. How did the rest of the morning unfold, and how did you get the word that he wasn't going to be there?
Well, it was pretty crazy because, you know, these federal trials are very well scripted. They've been preparing for 2 years. So we're all in the courtroom. We're waiting. There are all these empty chairs waiting for the prospective jurors who are behind closed doors. They're waiting to come on and be questioned. The judge finally comes out to the bench at 9:15. It was supposed to start at 9. And he says, "Are you ready to proceed?" And Golubski's lawyer, whose name is Chris Joseph, said, "I'm missing a client right now." And asked what was the problem. He said that his client, Roger Golubski, was despondent over media coverage and wasn't there yet. And then they talked to a person from probation marshal service who said, as of 8:57, we know he's still at home because they have that home monitoring bracelet on him. So they knew he wasn't going to get there. So they postponed the trial then till 1, and the judge issued a warrant for his arrest.
So what do we know so far about the circumstances around Roger Golubski's death?
All we know so far is that at the very hour that his federal trial was to begin, we believe that he committed suicide. It's still under investigation, so I can't say that for certain. But KBI issued a statement yesterday that said Roger Golubski died in his home on his back porch by a fatal gunshot wound. And they said that no foul play is suspected, which is basically law enforcement code for we think it's suicide.
Okay. What are you hearing from your sources about how they're feeling after this news broke, the victims of his alleged crimes?
It's a very mixed bag. It's a complicated mix of maybe happy that he's gone, but really sad and frustrated that they didn't get to air this entire case in public, that he wasn't basically brought to bear for these alleged crimes. You know, it really rallied the community when he was arrested. For the first time in decades, they thought, hey, maybe somebody's going to pay attention. Hey, maybe somebody's going to make this guy accountable. And that all went away yesterday.
So what happens next here, Peggy? Roger Golubski is dead. The case has been dismissed by prosecutors. So is that just it here?
That is the million-dollar question, and one everybody keeps asking me. And the short answer would be yes, I believe so. I talked to a leading defense attorney here in town last night, and basically he said, I hope the victims find some peace, but they're probably not going to get any justice through the system.
I wanted to point out that some of the victims' rights representatives in KCK were saying yesterday that there are more perpetrators from the police department out there who haven't yet been brought to justice. What can you tell us about that part of all this?
So social activists have long been calling for the U.S. Department of Justice to do what's called a patterns and practice investigation. So really look at the KCK Police Department, from the bottom up, from the top down. And so far, they haven't heard anything about that. I know that the U.S. DOJ has looked at potentially doing that because, of course, these allegations and the charges against Golubski were brought by the Civil Rights Division. So they are calling for that kind of thing, an official investigation. I don't know that they're going to get it.
The district attorney in Wyandotte County is a man named Mark Dupree. What's his position on pursuing wrongdoings in the police department in his county?
So when Mark Dupree was first elected, one of the first things he did was help get Lamont McIntyre out of prison. Lamont McIntyre, as you know, was the case that really triggered this. It was his exoneration case that showed that Golubski, who was working in cahoots with a allegedly corrupt prosecutor, basically framed Lamont McIntyre by forcing two eyewitnesses to say it was him. So I think Dupree was considered the good guy in the beginning because he dropped that case against Lamont McIntyre. He also said some things that were correct for the community, meaning, yes, we're going to look into this. Yes, we're going to look at Golubski's cases. He got $1 million from the UG to digitize those cases. He also said he would set up a conviction integrity unit. We haven't seen that yet.
Peggy's going to stick around for a little bit. Nikki Richardson joins us now. She's president and co-founder of Justice for Wyandotte, that was formed in 2020 in response to fears of the Kansas City, Kansas Police Department. She's also a member of the Unified Government's Law Enforcement Advisory Board. Nikki, thanks for taking time with us today.
Thank you for having me.
I want to get your reaction to the news of Golubski's suicide. Nikki, how are you feeling today?
I've been having a tough time processing it since yesterday. It's really kind of hard to wrap your head around it because it just wasn't what anybody expected the day to look like. In all intents and purposes, it was, expected to be a pretty normal, boring day in court that was going to kick off a long trial that everybody had in hopes would bring out more information that a lot of people were looking for so they could get healing. And we have just kind of been placed at this standstill while we're trying to wrap our head around, what to do next. It's disheartening for just a lot of reasons.
I'm wondering about members of your community and what you're hearing from them.
A lot of questions. There's a lot of questions surrounding the circumstances of, Golubski's last moments. A lot of questions that I find to be valid given just the growing distrust that people have had with KCK PD through the years. And, people are wanting answers, just point blank period.
When you talk about Roger Golubski's last moments, what are you referring to? Are you questioning whether, in fact, he died by suicide, Nikki?
Yeah, a lot of questions have been surrounded, exactly, if it was it suicide or, how exactly did he have a gun in his possession when he was supposed to be on house arrest? Who was supposed to be with him during that time? How was he expected to get to court? Was there not a lawyer there that morning? Was there not a caretaker? Where was his significant other? Why was he by himself? especially if he was despondent, given the news based off of what the lawyer had said. So there's just a lot of questions, and I find all of those questions to be valid. I don't ask to know those answers, but I definitely know that the community deserves answers and deserves transparency.
Nikki, in your view, should Roger Golubski have been on house arrest to begin with?
In my view, no. I think he should have been in custody. I understood the reasoning to be, his health, and, they felt that house arrest would be best for him. I think now in hindsight, I don't know if that is true. I do believe he should have been in custody.
What is your organization, Justice for Wyandotte, going to do now moving forward after this news?
Well, our main focus has been to make sure that there are serious reform changes, policy practices, and laws that are changed to make sure that Wyandotte County doesn't experience this again. We would love to be able to work with all parties involved. That includes our law enforcement agencies and the unified government to make sure that that happens. And I want to make sure that the conversation continues. The downside about Golubski kind of being the star of the show is that it overshadows the system that allowed this to happen and the other players that were involved that allowed this to happen. So we want to make sure that the conversation continues so that there's full accountability, but that there's also serious change to make sure that there is a brighter future for Wyandotte County going forward.
Nikki, when you talk about accountability, what kind of measures do you want to see laid out here?
I wouldn't be the best person to answer that question, only because, our main goal is to get the healing and the justice that the victims of Golubski want. For a community perspective, we just want to see reform and change. But as far as what that looks like for the victims, I just don't know, and I don't even know if what they need is possible at this point. There's not a dollar amount that I think you can put on this type of tragedy and on this type of harm. At most, we were just at least hoping that people got to tell their stories and that it would be on court record. I don't know if I can answer that question.
As we sit here and talk today, when it comes to accountability, when it comes to financial help for the victims, how confident are you that you're going to see that one day?
To be perfectly honest, not very, but, at the very beginning of this, I wasn't very confident. We unfortunately know kind of historically that these types of cases and these types of situations generally don't go in the favor of marginalized communities, but that doesn't stop the attempt to try to fight. And so we got way further than we even expected. So there's all reason to have hope that there will be, something that comes out of this that will be, some form of justice for the victims. But I'm a realist. So, I know it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. It may take years, but there's a glimmer of hope. But no, it's not large now.
That's Nikki Richardson. She's president and co-founder of Justice for Wyandotte. Nikki, appreciate your time this morning. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
We'll be right back with more from our program following the apparent suicide of Roger Golubski in just a minute.
I'm joined now by the Reverend Rick Behrens. He's pastor of Grandview Presbyterian Church in KCK. He's been there for about 4 decades. He's a former KCK police chaplain. Reverend Behrens, thanks so much for taking some time. Good morning.
Thank you, Steve. Good morning.
What was your first reaction to the news that Roger Golubski had taken his own life?
Well, I was actually at the eye doctor when I heard it, and felt like my whole brain was going to explode, and just felt a great deal of frustration and confusion and anger.
Frustration, Rick, why?
Because of the whole hypocrisy of this system that allowed a white cop who rigged an entire system against young black men and young black women, which led to the loss of many lives and broken families, for him to spend, 2 to 3 years in his home awaiting the chance to game this system again? It's just laughably unbelievable to me that it actually happened.
He should have been in prison awaiting trial as opposed to serving time at home on house arrest.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's you know, I've often said that we don't really have a criminal justice system. We have a criminally unjust system. As justice is chaos in this nation.
You know, you were once a KCK police chaplain, and you left that volunteer role after an interaction with Roger Golubski a number of years ago. Tell me a little bit about what happened there, Reverend.
Well, I was on a death notification, which was the main thing that we as chaplains do and did. And I got to the notification, and what was strange was that Golubski and a couple of victim services people were already in the middle of the notification when I got there. Normally, they wait for the chaplain to come, but they didn't wait. They went right in, and Golubski did the notification, and I got there in the middle of it, and the victim's mom, or the deceased person's mom, who died in police custody, the young man died in police custody, and we were there to notify the mother. She just sat very dejectedly on the couch when she heard the news, and she just said, "You killed my son. The system killed my son," with her head down, no aggression at all, just complete resignation to the horrible situation. And at that point, Golubski came across the room and stood over her and berated her and said, "You are the system. This happened as it should have happened." And so then he sort of snapped his fingers to his entourage and said, "Let's go." And I did not go with him. I stayed with the family for another hour or so and talked. But yeah, and then I tried to report it the next day. I called and asked people to look into it. Said they'd get back with me in a week. 2 weeks went by, 3 weeks went by. I called back to the same people and said, "Has anything happened?" And they said, "No, sorry, we can't do anything. That's Roger Golubski."
Wow. You know, after his suicide, Rick, Roger Golubski is, as you're pointing out, not going to face consequences for his crimes. Given that, I'm wondering, what does justice look like to you and to your community now? Is it making sure something like this can't happen again, or where are we?
Well, I think first of all, I think we need a federal investigation into his death, because there's too many questions. Just as Nikki stated, we're hearing from the community, there are too many questions out there, and it's going to be hard for people to accept that he did this on his own. Like Nikki said, how did he get a gun? Why wasn't anybody watching him? There's just so many questions that I think most people would really appreciate a federal investigation into his death. Of course, we've already been calling for a federal investigation into the police department, and we can't get that. We had a mayor who made a campaign promise that he was going to go to D.C. and call for an investigation, and then once he was in office said, "Nope, not going to do it." And this is the other thing, is where are our community leaders in this? Where are our elected officials? Where are our commissioners? Where's our mayor? Where's our DA? Who's going to speak up for this community and what's happened to it, and call for justice, call for some measure of accountability? This is what's been sad over the years, is that even our commissioners hardly say anything about this. And these are the people that are elected to represent us, our community. And it's just damn frustrating to not hear anything from these folks regarding this, because I think if they did speak up, there might be more changes.
That's the Reverend Rick Behrens. He's pastor of the Grandview Presbyterian Church in Kansas City, Kansas. Reverend, thanks so much for your time this morning. Much appreciated.
Thank you, Steve.
Our final guest for this segment, Nico Quinn, joins us now. She once gave false testimony that sent a man named Lamont McIntyre to prison for a crime he didn't commit. Nico Quinn says now that Roger Golubski pressured her into giving false testimony. Nico, thanks for joining us here in the studio. Much appreciated.
You're welcome.
On our podcast, Overlook, Peggy Lowe told the story of how Roger Golubski pressured you into this false testimony. So this is especially personal to you. Just as I've asked our other guests this morning, I'm just wondering, what was your first reaction to the news of Roger Golubski's death?
When I got the news, I was angry and hurt at the same time. And I was angry because there's so many unanswered questions.
We're hearing that a lot this morning, aren't we?
For one. For two, where's my justice?
Mm-hmm.
What are they going to do for the community and the victims' families that are still here, that still have unanswered questions?
How frustrated are you, the Reverend Behrens just pointed out, about the lack of an outcry from leadership in Wyandotte County? How frustrated are you about that? Do you share that concern?
I'm very frustrated because they are complete failures to me. It's to the point where I don't even want people to know that I came from Wyandotte County, and I used to love Wyandotte County and wouldn't mind telling nobody, I'm from Wyandotte County, I'm from the dot, or so on and so forth. But once I told Mark Dupree, and I also told the mayor that you guys are not placed in your positions by design. This is where y'all supposed to be in this time. And I said, I made the statement of when God sent Moses to tell Pharaoh to let his people go. And that's what you're supposed to be doing. You're supposed to make them wrongs right. Why are you not saying anything? Why are you silent? Why are y'all silent? What secrets are y'all keeping from us?
Why are they silent? What's your sense of that?
I believe they really don't want to get involved, but it's making them look bad. It's making them become a part of something that was going on decades before they were even, probably some of them was even born. But you guys are placed in the position that y'all have to fix it. God didn't bless y'all where y'all are. Y'all didn't make it there on your own. Y'all were predestined to be there. So what y'all gonna do?
Nico, you told us that you want families to be comforted, and I'm wondering what that means for you. Does that mean compensation? Does that mean getting more answers about how this happened, or does it mean all of that?
It means all of that, but what people don't understand, these women, these victims, that's exactly what they are. But these people have names. They have names. Say they name, quit calling them prostitutes, quit calling them drug addicts or crackheads. These people, these women, prospectively have names. I'm asking for all this money that's been made off these victims. Some of them don't have headstones. Some of them don't even have urns to be placed in. What are y'all doing? We need to make that happen. If I had the money, I would pay for everybody's headstone, because I believe that these women or these victims had a hard time living. Why not let them rest? Place their names on their graves so that you know who they are, because we didn't know who they were on the streets.
You know, as we sit here and talk today, the day after Roger Golubski apparently took his own life in Wyandotte County, what kind of justice are you expecting to receive? Are you expecting to hear a response from leadership, or are you losing hope today?
I have lost hope a long time ago. I'm praying for it, but who's to say that we're going to get it? We haven't got anything yet, or we haven't even had answers. And when you talk to them, they don't want to talk to you, but they made a lot of false promises.
What do you want the people listening to this program to know about what this news means to you, your family, and to the community?
I want them to know that it's very selfish of him, and it hurts. It hurts to the core. It feels like you letting the air out of a balloon. That's how I felt. Like somebody letting the air out, and I just cried. And a lot of people are like, why are you hurt? I'm hurt because I'm left like I'm back to where I started. What happened? I have questions that I need answers to, and I need closure.
Justice has been denied here.
Yes.
That's Nico Quinn, who once was involved in the case involving Lamont McIntyre, pressured, she says, by Roger Golubski into giving false testimony. Thanks for coming in and sharing your story. Appreciate it.
That was Steve Kraske in conversation with Peggy Lowe, Nikki Richardson, Reverend Rick Behrens, and Nico Quinn.
Context of White Supremacy. Gus T. Renegade in for another broadcast, hopefully to share constructive information on the system of white supremacy. Today's date, Saturday, December 7, 2024. So I have been told. And for our weekly compensatory call-in, go over what has transpired during the last 7 days, which included the reported suicide death of Roger Golubski, suspected rapist, suspected race soldier. Dial in if you have observations, thoughts to share. I remember we talked about this case, and I used social media for a poll. I wanted to know how many people had heard of Roger Golubski. This was at the end of 2022. How many people, non-white, had heard of Roger Golubski, and at what point? So did you hear about him this week? Did you hear about him sometime over the last year? You heard about him sometime since 2020. Like I said, I was asking this poll in 2022. So you heard him sometime since 2020, or you heard of him before 2020. I think those were the parameters. They were like 4 choices offered. The vast majority of people, and I think there was one more, had not. I don't know who Roger Golubski is. I think the vast majority of people at the end of 2022 who answered this poll, and it was over 100 responses, either didn't know who Roger Golubski was at that time, and or had just learned about who he was within the past 7 days or so. I think this was well over 50% of the people were in this category. And I mean, I think it gets to like 90% if we extend it to the vast majority of people either didn't know who he was at all or had learned about him sometime very recent, within the last month or so, if at all. And I said then, they've been talking about Roger Golubski's raping children, black children, and black females, and putting black males unjustly in greater confinement, a little bit of everything else, terrorizing all the black people in Kansas City. Shout to Obeezy. They've been talking about this for like a decade. A good solid decade, especially if you're in the Kansas City area. I mean, it just goes on and on and on and on and on. That was another one of those I was like, man, check the newspaper. Now, this is one that you probably wouldn't have seen this because our BFF, Amy Goodman, Democracy Now!, she didn't do a good job discussing the Golubski case. In fact, I'm going to have to check and see, has she even said anything about all this since this week came around? Let us see. Oh, Amy Goodman, suspected race soldier, what has she had to say about Roger Golubski? We got one report. One report. They didn't even get an update from this week. One report, October 18, 2022, and really, that's late from what I just told you. They've been talking about this for like a decade. A good solid decade. One. We did better than them on this, like, geez. Anyway, but if you were not in the Kansas area, you probably wouldn't have paid attention to this case, just wouldn't report it on. Who cares about black people? Until 2022 when he was arrested. He's been under house arrest, Golubski, for the last 2 years. You can go back in the archives and hear we had Laura McDonald as a guest on the program at the end of 2022. We talked about this case. We talked about it other times within that time period as well. Reveals so much about what it means to be classified as white. But other things happened this week. We'll catch up on all that. The number to dial, 605 313-5164. The code 564943 pound. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. Number again, 605-313-5164. The code 564943 pound. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. If you have difficulty dialing in via phone, which happens to me often, you can always try the free conference call HD app. Go to your app store, Android, iPhone. Think of Patrice Lumumba and the Miners. But you can download it for free. Works throughout the known universe. We've had guests throughout the known universe who downloaded the free app, use it just like a phone. Once you download it, you'll see the dial pad just like your phone. Number, same code, 564943 pound. And you can dial in. You can even choose a handle and what have you. Works for free, and sometimes some people have found that will sometimes allow them to dial in when the phone is being uncooperative. Anywho, let's see. 1, listener-supported counter-racist radio. Invest if you think the cows is constructive. Hit the blog racism-notes.blogspot.com. racism-notes.blogspot.com. Listener-supported counter-racist radio. Hit the blog, top right corner, you'll see the PayPal button. Directly beneath, you'll see the buttons PayPal, Cash App, and Venmo. Enormous gratitude to all of the investors who motored us to California and back, hopefully worthy of your time and energy. If you missed out, didn't have the nickels together, prioritized Christmas holiday over Gus T's California counter-racist sojourn, have no fear. Buffalo is looming now. It is way down the line, thank God, because I am not interested in going anyplace anytime soon. Home body in the system of white supremacy racism. But Buffalo is looming for some of the same reasons we just heard. Anyway, invest. Much obliged for the folks who have kept us broadcasting for 16 years come February 21. Hopefully we have been more accurate than not. You can hit the Amazon wish list under Gus T. Renegade, also linked at the blog. Feel free to nab an item or 8. Posted it for Black Monday, as they say, Cyber Monday. If you missed out nabbing an item or 12, feel free. Make up for lost time. Now, let's see. 1, since I just mentioned the survey from some years back in terms of if people were familiar with Roger Golubski and how long they've been aware of this fellow, do you wear your seatbelt? Folks who dial in, chime in, let us know. Do you wear your seatbelt, and have you been stopped ever for not wearing a seatbelt? Let us know. Let us know. That's something I've recommended on the program before for non-white people. Wear your seatbelt. They have laws about that in many parts of the world. And I personally have been in the vehicle with other non-white motorists where they have been stopped and ticketed for not wearing a seatbelt. Even some of them where they said, oh no, I've had this before. And some places that is a hefty ticket, like $200 and such for not wearing a seatbelt. I'm just all under the rubric of, it seems like there are a lot of incidents that happen to black motorists, right? Philando Castile, Rodney King, right? Lots of incidents happen. Sandra Bland, when black people are out motoring down the highway. So my counter-racist logic, try to do all that we can to minimize contact. Even the smallest things that you can think of, seatbelt, because a lot of times that'll be pretext. You know, you didn't have a seatbelt on, or looked like you were swerving or some other, tail light was broken, like obey the laws of the road so they will have fewer reasons to justify legally stopping, harassing, terrorizing you, putting old Roger Golubski on you, that sort of thing. Just a suggestion where that's even, I guess maybe I should throw in, God forbid, hopefully the Waymo self-driving vehicles and such won't go berserk and run you over on the road. I guess there might be a safety component to it as well should you be in a collision. Hope not. But at minimum, my priority in the thinking was about minimizing contact with the enforcement official. I guess that says something too about what I think the danger is. Racist man, racist woman, racist man, racist child, not wayward motorist, self-driving vehicle. I guess that could be a problem too. But you really want to watch out for the race soldiers. Roger Golubski, see? Daniel Holtzclaw, see? Justin Volpe. Lots of problems once you're out on the road. Food, I was going to mention that as well, so important, especially during the holiday season, especially, and in so many ways in the workplace, they're going to have so many opportunities, the holiday buffet, and I made cookies, and we got eggnog, and we got turkey leftovers and stuffing leftovers and pumpkin pie and all the rest of it. No thank you, no thank you, no thank you. I did not come to work to eat chitlins and hog mogs and do potlucks for a whole month. And you can just tell people, I'm trying to keep my weight down. I put on a lot of weight last year and all that. I got diabetes. If you're Negro, they'll believe I got diabetes. My uncle lost a foot and all the rest of it. So, I can't even, I got the Ozempic in the car. So, I can't eat none of that. And it would be through and through, family and such. I've said that repeatedly. If you have shindigs with attempted family and it's constructive, you all don't get together and throw food on each other and call names and all the rest of it, hey, see if you can make that more constructive, more helpful for all. If you don't want to talk about racism, white supremacy, fine. At least, do we have to have deep fried everything? Can we get some more vegetables? Do we have to have country ham? Maybe we can remix the macaroni and cheese. Maybe if you got some nephews and nieces and they like to cook, let's do a vegan macaroni and cheese. How about that? We'll hook that up. We'll do vegan sweet potato pie. How about that? Let's do something where we don't have to eat all this lard and flesh and swine and all the rest of it. Like, we can get some more veggies in everybody. Everybody can lose a little bit of weight, get some more water in. We can get a little walk in after we eat a little bit. Everybody, see if you can do a little bit healthier. We can take better care, have healthier recipes. They got tons. They got vegan YouTube channels for cooking, vegan cookbooks galore. You could never read them all. They got cooking classes back in effect. Now that COVID-19 is over with, I'd said that before. You could even have, in fact, you could probably even check at your local community center and see, because you could probably get something if you have black people, if they cook in your area, if they cook healthier foods, see if they'd be willing to volunteer and do like a cooking class at a community center. They have a kitchen, do a cooking class, because there's so many people, they don't know how to cook properly. They don't know how, and I say, hey, everybody should have at least like a B+ in cooking. You don't have to be like a gourmet chef, but at least, you can cook some pretty good things. If you had to cook, if you have attempted family, if your brother, your sister, you got nieces and nephews and they stepped out or something, cousins, and they say, look here, grandchildren, whatever it is, and they said, hey, I got a constructive counter-racist exercise or a business trip where I have to step away for 2 weeks. I need you to fill in. We have a family with 3 offspring, and they're too young to cook for themselves. They're between the ages of 8 and 13, so they can't do all the cooking themselves. Need you to come in and handle all the meal prep for 2 weeks. You should be able to do that flawless. It shouldn't be the fire alarm is going off every day, and oh my God, when are the parents coming? DoorDash. Do we have enough on the DoorDash? Jesus Christ, he's burned it. It shouldn't be that. No problem. Got it. That's all you need me to do? Great. You already got food in the refrigerator? Great. Easy. No problem. Doesn't have to be gourmet. You don't have to do baked Alaska or nothing like that. But yes, I can prepare meals for 4 people for 2 weeks. I will not die. We will not get salmonella. We'll make it. Any hoodles. But the food component, as I sit here with my smoothie, it has such an enormous impact. You eat bad food and they put all that lard and hot dogs and fried giblets and chitlins and cheesy this and Big Macs, Chips Ahoy, Lunchables, and they put all that on you. All that, I mean, it's so many things in terms of what are the chemicals that they got in this food. It's so addictive. It sets your food tastes for life. And you have people who are really incompetent in the kitchen. I used to be one of them. Like, that is horrible for life. Not being able to prepare meals. You got to always be dependent on someone else. If it's you, well, we eat hot dogs, something in the microwave. Come on, man. And you should be able to, if it's veggies, let's get down. I know what to do with some cabbage. I know what to do with some eggplant. Give it here. Let's go. Broccoli, give it here. Bok choy, give it here. I got it. Cookbooks, man, take that seriously, and especially if you have children, cook with your offspring. Can't say that enough. If you don't know how to cook, guess what? You can learn together. It'll be amazing. Might be some of the best time that you have with your offspring. You can cook together, eat together, whoopee. Learn together. You might even get good at it. It might be something that you can do for a lifetime. That can be some of your memories. Not that we sat around and ate greasy Papa John's pizza, got an old shakaroni, put on 15 pounds. Maybe we made pizza. This is our special pizza dough we used to make all the time and adapted it. Got all the different ways we made it over the years. Make old dad's pizza. Come on. Wait, man, then you make vegan pizza with zucchini and not pepperoni. Mushrooms, spinach. Let's see. Before we get to the reports, one, again, social media would not be on it at all if I didn't do the program, because I do use it for promoting Context of White Supremacy and counter-racist work in general. I try share information. Dr. Frances Cress Welsing, as I find it, I'll post. Hey, she was a guest here 31 times, so try to post the programs frequently. Then I've been going back finding archived newspapers, because Dr. Welsing, she has so many news articles about her work, and sometimes she wrote to the newspaper, especially the Washington Post. And then other people writing about her for the duration of her public life, which spans like a good 70 years, about, which is kind of staggering. Not quite 7, about 60 years, I'd say. A good solid 60 years, which is still staggering. But I had posted, and I've done this for like years. This is not something that I just started doing or what have you. I've done this for a long time. We even have programs where she was with us, and we went back and read some of these older newspaper articles about her work and different lectures and what have you to get her responses all these years later. So this past week, as I said, I haven't even been back from California 2 weeks yet. Thankfully, my computer is still logging in as though I'm at Cal Berkeley. Spectacular gift that keeps on giving. As I said, over a month now, the whole time I was in California, I realized, wow, like they have substantially greater research access. I said some of the catalogs when I'm here, University of Washington access, I'll get like 82 databases. I said when I hit UCLA was right the first time, which is in LA. Man, it jumped to searching like 150 something databases, and it stayed that high even when I came back to the East Bay. Cal Berkeley, 150 something databases. Like, whoa, that is extraordinary. Like, just access to so much information. And hey, the biggest thing happening on the planet remains the system of white supremacy. So I'd searched the catalog before with the University of Washington's access. I decided, hey, let me search it again with Cal Berkeley's access and see what I get, since they have such greater access. It goes back, and I normally switch it if I'm trying to be comprehensive. I'll switch it and go oldest first, so I can kind of start where the first starts to pop up in the newspaper, whatever the subject is, and just move forward through time. We're rolling back, and it's like in the 1950s. Now, I'm thinking this should have popped up before, because some of these are in newspapers that the University of Washington has access to, but these look unfamiliar. So I'm taking them just, because they look unfamiliar. They've got a report from April 1955 on Dr. Frances Cress Welsing and her going to get on-the-job training, as they say, for med school. They got a picture and everything. That's what really kind of staggered me, because I think I have many now, but I remember the first time I saw Dr. Welsing with chemically mutilated hair when she was like a child, I think in med school or something. It was right after she transitioned. I was like, whoa, because for decades she's had natural hair, regal, gorgeous, and matches the brilliance that is coming out of her mouth. I'm not just talking counter racism, and then I got chemically mutilated blonde hair. No shame to anyone who does that, but I mean, it would be a little bit incongruent, yes? That wasn't the case with Dr. Welsing. Everything matched. Black self-respect through and through. But to see her when that wasn't the case, at least the hair was different. Like, wow, staggering. So now, like there are a bunch of pictures. This is another one. This 1955 report where, again, she looks like a child. She was still in med school and all that. So I posted it, and I posted a number of these older newspaper reports. Now, the only thing with this one, it's so old. This, like I said, it's 1955. It's April 1955. This is actually 4 months before Emmett Till was lynched. Wow, right? Anyway, I posted it, and it got all of these shares, which I just thought was weird, because I posted archived newspaper articles of Dr. Welsing for very, very, like years at this point. That is not anything new. I've done that for a long time. I don't know what was special about this one, other than, like I said, this is 4 months before Emmett Till was lynched, if that means anything. Either way, I am not affiliated, associated, valued, whatever, by any of the people affiliated with Dr. Welsing or who espouse her work. Ditto for the people who espouse the work of Neely Fuller Jr. It is united, independent, and in fact, many, many non-white people talk bad about Gus T. No problem. United, independent. Although I do look like, dang, y'all don't have access to just go to the library, because a lot of these Washington Post, you can just go to the library, especially if you're in the D.C. area. You just go to the library, search Frances Cress Welsing. You could even think now, how many people you got free time? Search Dr. Welsing, see which pops up. She was in the papers a lot, because she was on television a lot. She was on the radio a lot. The archives are extraordinary. That would even be one. If I had offspring, might be Welsing Day. We go to the library, do a search, Dr. Welsing. Let's see what you can find. Might be Dr. Welsing for a certain decade, for the 60s. See what you find. 70s. See what you find. It is staggering. In fact, you can even find a staggering public record of when Dr. Welsing was fired from Howard University. That was apparently a very publicly talked about event. Lots of articles there. That's another one where I take a step back, like Roger Golubski, and double whammy for Dr. Welsing, because she was in the newspaper so much, even writing the paper, and she espoused and put in practice reading the newspaper. So I'm especially miffed to hear COWS listeners, individuals classified as black, victims of racism in general, disdain for checking the news, being aware of what's happening in the world. Man. Anyway, that would be, if you hadn't thought of that, yes, maybe if you have free time, you go to your library, check the historical newspapers. What's in here for Dr. Welsing? In fact, you could do the same thing. Neely Fuller Jr., also in the papers quite a bit. Might be other individuals who, you respect their counter-racist work, especially if they're older or have transitioned. Dr. Cam Bond, see what pops up where he's in the newspaper and such. Might be interesting. Certainly with Dr. Welsing, it is fast. Especially see black people write into Essence magazine, like just crack pop, Dr. Wells isn't talking about white people and her theory of white. She is a crackpot. Why'd she let this do? Well, but she said that. Dr. Wells said that all the time. Fascinating to see it in writing, though. Anyway, the newspaper articles are fascinating. Maybe that might be a reason, if you use social media constructively, check the cows. I posted it all the way through. And like I said, I posted several. It wasn't just that one. It was many. Let's see. Next. Man, the book club should perhaps be mandatory. I thought that so many times. The book club, indirectly, and Peyton Gendron's slaughter at the tops. But the book club, 22 caliber Killer Man, was all together, confluence of factors. Book club right there at the center. We renamed the book club the Catherine Massey Book Club. Ended up going to Buffalo. I didn't even want to go to. I had never had an inkling of, West New York. No. And then California for a month, no less. Book club. Now, part of that was soundtrack to Coup d'etat, but still, most of that was because I wouldn't have went to L.A., wasn't going to San Francisco already. And that's how I explained it to Johann Grimond Prey. I was supposed to be going to California for Jonestown. This is just auxiliary, although Jim Jones was in L.A., so, see, all goes back to Jonestown. Anyway, the book club should perhaps be mandatory, and because we do not read enough. We are not informed. We don't read the newspaper. We don't watch the news. We don't listen to the news. In aggregate, some exceptions, but geez, we are just spectacularly uninformed about everything, particularly the system of white supremacy racism. Pitifully uninformed. Gus T at the top of the list. Book club trying to correct that. That's why we don't read fiction. Book club. We are reading Andre Bloom's My Country, Africa. Non-white female with a white parent. Commandant of Patrice Lumumba, 1950s and 60s, pivotal figure on the continent of Africa, and contemporary of Neely Fuller Jr., many other folks that we esteem. Dr. King, she was born in that decade, 1920s, where it's just fascinating seeing folks who were kind of born in that era, regardless of which continent or where in the world. It is fascinating, particularly if they're classified as black, how they respond to racism, white supremacy, and kind of comparing and contrasting their views on the system. Anyway, we're reading Andre Bloom. We got back on track with the book club this past Thursday, and we're kind of getting close to the end. And she's talking about this period in the Congo, 1950s and 60s, leading up to the assassination of Patrice Lumumba. And so she's kind of giving her views on what's happening. And keep in mind, for people that are not reading, haven't been with us on this particular book, in the Congo genocide. This is, white people have written tons of books on the assassination of Patrice Lumumba, made movies on it. One of them was in L.A. They've written tons of books on so-called colonialism, white terrorism in the Congo, then and now, Apple event through and through. They were chopping off black people's feet, hands, raping children, killing black people, not by the bushel, by the millions. Genocide. Dikembe Mutombo, all that. Now, we're reading the book, and so she's talking about the resistance to get so-called independence from the white Belgians in the Congo. She writes, it would be unfair to say that all whites in the Congo were detestable. I read that as racist, detestable. But the sum of misery inflicted on the blacks by the many far eclipsed the deeds of kindness of a few. Rare and precious indeed was a friendship with a white. Wow. I changed my highlighter color for that passage. Wow. Just flippin' wow. Now, this is in the same section of the book where she describes herself as a militant, in quotes, whatever that means. And it didn't seem like she was using it as a pejorative, but she said she was a militant. And she says, direct quote, she discovered that the real enemy of Africa, meaning the entire continent, country, other Africans. Not white people, like her raping white father, Roger Golubski, or her white, what do you call them, baby daddies, shall we say? Not them. Africans. That really stuck in my craw, like, oh my God. The militant Africans. Not all white people are racist. We got some friendly, precious, friendly white people. I could throw up. After I got over my nausea, I paused because I said, man, that is important. Because I've heard that before. Can I pause to remember Pamela Evans Harris? And this might even be a significant pause because your version of Trojan Horse, Death of a Dark Nation, might not read like my version. I have an original copy. My original copy that is signed page 10 and 11. I want to skip and get to the exact, okay. Midpoint of page 11. And let me even rewind because we're not friends. We're not cool. I'm estranged even from Cal's listeners. I'm saying this with my middle finger up. Not at Pam, at you all. Had this before where y'all had the audacity. You all that didn't even read the book act like they love Pam so much and Gus gonna get on here. Man, middle finger up. I read this passage to Pam the very first time she was on the program. There's a reason. The book you have might not have this passage in it. Mine does. Finger up. Page 11. Question. Aren't some white people opposed to racism? Answer. Only if they are saying and doing something to oppose it. Whites like Isaac T. Hopper and John Fairfield lost their lives helping slaves escape the South via the Underground Railroad. John Brown, a white man, encouraged armed insurrection by slaves as a means to end slavery. His attempt to start a liberation movement among slaves led to a charge of treason for which he was hanged. During the Civil Rights Movement, thousands of whites marched with Dr. Martin Luther King to protest opposed the practice of racism. White civil rights activists Andrew Goodman and Michael Schwerner were murdered for registering black voters in Mississippi during the 1960s. Shout to James Chaney. In 2000, several white Highland Park, Illinois police officers put their jobs on the line by blowing the whistle on their department's practice of racial profiling blacks and other minorities. The whistleblower in the famous Tuskegee experiment was a white man, Peter Buxton, who died this year, unless my memory is bad, who brought the story to the press. Thanks to Buxton, the Tuskegee experiment became front-page news in the New York Times in July 1972. I pointed out during my California sojourn, this was a mere 6 years before Jonestown. Organizations like the Sentencing Project and the Justice Policy Institute and anti-racist activists like Tim Wise and Donna Lamb of CURE, Caucasians United for Reparations and Emancipation, have dedicated time and energy to fight against racism and injustice. Former school teacher and anti-racism activist Jane Elliott, the creator of the famous blue-eyed, brown-eyed exercise, has taught countless numbers of white students and adults what it is like to walk in a colored child's moccasins for a day. While these white individuals and organizations represent the minority, it is important to acknowledge their courageous contributions to the fight against racism. We must tell the whole truth, not half-truths, to the best of our ability. Page 11. Now, we spoke with Pam about this very first time that she was a guest on the program, and I read this passage specifically, and not with rancor or getting about the way I'm reading it right now, not being nasty. And I said, well, I mean, Tim Wise, been a guest on this program, admitted to being a racist, said Dr. Welsing's work was pseudoscientific bullshit. Put some bass in his voice for that one. He said that. I guess he was courageous in his appraisal of her work. Jane Elliott admitted a racist. She's been a guest on the program as well, but even specifically, she pointed out it does not take courage to be a white person and do what she does. She is paid well. It takes courage to be classified as black and get up and live every day on the plantation. That is a courageous act. That's from Jane Elliott, not Gus T. But it reminded me of this because this is on page 11 of a book that is over 300 pages. Over 300 pages. This is on page, like at the very beginning, we got, hey, there are some good ways. It's almost the same way. It would be unfair to say that all white people are racist. And I stopped and I said, man, Fuller has come on the program and said the exact same thing. And he said this for years. I could have put a sound clip together if I wanted to. If any of you all out there want to take issue with that, what did I say? Middle finger up. But he said it for years. I mean, if they really called me on it, I could produce it because he said it many times. And I think he said it here. More than once, I think. But I know I've heard it many times. Not all white people are racist because I've said, years I've said, VGQ to Mr. Fuller, same thing. I don't raise it as an issue. And you don't know what he's talking about. None of that. I said, man, that's one. I agree with almost everything Mr. Fuller talks about with code. Not that I'm required to do so. Not that any of us was required to do so. But one of the few I do not agree with. Not all white people are racist. That phrase should be retired. And I've said, hey, you, Fuller, Andre Bloom, Pam, none of you has evidence. Some of the people that Pam named, they have admitted to being a racist on this program. I didn't have a gun to their head. We weren't even in the same area code. All I've said is, hey, since none of us has evidence that's going to stand for all time, this here white person is not, has not ever, will not ever, directly, indirectly, consciously, subconsciously practice white supremacy racism, since none of us has evidence that's going to stand up for all time's sake. Don't say that. Get to your point. Say whatever you got to say about racism. Why is it? And it really stood out to me like, man, we're in the Congo where they are chopping off black people's feet. Shout to Dr. Welsing on a planet where it's not that many white people. We're in the Congo where they're chopping off black people's feet. And we got to stop and make that, who. Not all white people are racist. Why does that have to be at the beginning of the book? We haven't even got started yet. We're talking about child rape and all this other stuff. Before we get to all that, not all white people. Jane Elliott is a cool white woman. And John Brown said that. John Brown, man, we got to go dig up white people that's been dead for 200 years. And even John Brown, like, terrorists hacked up all them white people in Kansas. Man. At the end of the day, I think, and it reminded me because we've had a lot of conversations about this. It reminded me, Zach Casey came on this broadcast after the White Privilege Conference, 2010, April. White man, admitted racist, I believe. And he explained, hey, I'm classified as white. It is impossible, the impossibility of positive white identity, exactly how he phrased it, explained it on the program. It's not even possible to be classified as white and not be racist. Non-white callers dial in, we waste all this time, and I'm saying that directly, specifically. We wasted all this time talking about white children, white babies, white newborns, white invalids. Man, you are hurting my head. And that's where the conversation goes consistently. Newborns, infants, invalids, and a wheelchair. Hey, man, hey. At the end of the day, can you say this newborn, not now, not ever, practice racism, white supremacy? If you don't have that evidence, this invalid, old people, whatever, the old folks, even though, man, I done seen so many reports. Even Timothy Wise talk about the report. Man, these old, decrepit white people that got dementia and Alzheimer's and all the rest of it, One thing they don't seem to lose, man. Nigger, get your hands off me. You don't put me in the bathtub, man. I didn't ask for a sponge bath. I didn't want no nigger to do it. Get off it. They got tons of cases, tons of cases, but, you know, whatever. You don't have evidence that this person not now, not ever practiced white supremacy racism. That phrase should be retired. I think that is a part of the confusion of white supremacy racism. And you know what I connected all of that with? I was just in California at the cemetery November 18th for the memorial of Jonestown. I'm talking to relatives who lost nearly a dozen black attempted relatives. What question did I tell you I asked that I think I got recorded? Do you think Jim Jones is a racist? In unison, they said no. All of that is connected. It ends up not just, hey, not all white people are racist. None of these white people are exactly what does one have to do to qualify as a racist? If you went and marched with Dr. King, I'm against racism. What? I went and some of them said, I marched against George Floyd. I voted for Obeezy. I supported Brown v. Board of Education. I burned my draft card. I slept with a nigger woman. That's what Roger Golubski said. That's what Roger Golubski said. I slept with a nigger woman. Victims guaranteed qualified. I'm just pointing that out as a pattern. How widespread that is. It almost seems mandatory. You have to say, not all white people are racist. Fuck that. I'm not saying that. I don't even think it's true. In fact, I'm contrasting that with my experience. I don't even come on here and say, all white people are racist. I do not. The number of non-white people who have the scorn, ridicule, publicly get mad about this. Dr. Eddie Moore Jr. and others mad about, I could stack names up around this. Wow. That must be a major part of it because it's so widespread. I'm not with you all. If you don't think all white people are racist, that's on you. But it should be victims guaranteed qualified. I'm just pointing that out. We read that this week. Pam's book, Fuller says that victims guaranteed qualified. But I would say, man, at this point, since we've had this problem for so long, any ideas, concepts that have been around for a long time and don't seem like they have a lot of evidence to support them, they should be at minimum questioned in depth, thoroughly investigated. Maybe this is holding us back. Victims guaranteed qualified. Any hoodles. The news reports from this week, if it's going to say anything about all that, some of that even connected to us not thinking of white people as racist. Sade Robinson, do you think she thought Maxwell Anderson could be racist? In Dahmerland? Trial delayed until Memorial Day, they said. After Memorial Day. Been on my mind since April, man. It'll be a whole year. It's been on my mind for a long time with that case. Like, whoo, lots of questions. Sade Robinson, if you got children, that for sure. You do not want children who are kind of lax on that. Not all white people. Max is all right, you know. Jeff is all right, you know, he ain't got no problem. That white girl that killed the black dude down in Florida, trial is coming, you know, she's all right. She does the modeling and such. She likes black dudes. Yeah. Anyway, Roger Golubski, the only thing I'll say quickly about that trial, or I guess lack of a trial now, when they mentioned Roger Golubski, maybe he committed suicide, maybe he didn't. I mentioned we had Laura McDonald as a guest on the program, suspected racist. Not all white people are racist, so I guess Laura McDonald, maybe she's not a racist. Suspected race soldier, Laura McDonald, she was a guest on the program in October 22. We talked about the Roger Golubski case. She said it's alleged they had some sort of gentleman's club. Roger Golubski and others, that's what they talked about. Hey, investigation should continue. There are others. Golubski and others, they had some sort of gentleman's club where they would bring in black girls like 12, 13, 14. They would bring them in to like do some gyrating and dancing, like a strip club type of a thing. And I said, what? What? It's in the archives. You can go back and listen. And I was like, who is he bringing? You know, is he bringing Kansas City Chiefs players? Who is he bringing? Other police officers? That should be investigated for sure. That came to mind when they said, now, how did he die? Because he shouldn't have had a firearm. He's been under house arrest, not supposed to have a gun. Whatever. You're not going to castrate symbolically no white man who was an enforcement official for decades. But how did he die? How did he even get a gun? Why wasn't he under supervision? Did he commit suicide? Some of these other people who were at the club, shake it, that black sugar, shake it. Did they pay him a visit? And hey, man, you lived a good life. You're in your 70s. We don't want all this to come out. You don't want to go to prison. They start asking you about the club. Who else were you with? Isn't that what they're talking about with the Jeffrey Epstein case? And that's the same thing, sexual abuse and all this, and saying that other people were involved, and high, powerful white people, and they don't want no trial. And same thing, we don't want no trial and have all these details come out in court. Maybe that's not what happened. Maybe Mr. Golubski, I'm guilty. I've been raping and terrorizing for all these years. I'm a child rapist. I'm going to kill myself. I don't even want to go through with no trial, and we just be done with it. Maybe that's what happened. But investigate. I don't know what the correct word I do take it seriously. We had a number of folks this week who said Context of White Supremacy was how they first learned of Roger Golubski. I do take checking the news seriously. On the other hand, I do say, dang, they had been talking about Roger Golubski for a decade. We were so late. Me too, because I didn't hear about him until 2022. We were so late. He had been terrorizing people for like decades. It was right in the newspaper. Check the newspaper. Beyond that, last thing. That segment about the schools where they, in Kansas, no less, Kansas City, where they were terrorizing Christy D. Jones, black educator. They said these were middle schoolers who were terrorizing this teacher, black female teacher, Christy Jones. What? That's like 11, 12. And it was so bad, the police had to, like, what did they say exactly? Like, you don't have to identify them, right? No charges and all that. And they powerful white children, we got it. Racist child. But what exactly did they do? And then they said these little race soldier children, they terrorized the children and got back in, and we just keep it moving. And some of the other students are scared of her. Oh my God, we got Reb and Dill, they're going to blow up the school and all that. Said one of these little urchins, their parent is on the school board. I said, whoa. You mean they got on it and they said use their privilege. Use their privilege to not take punitive actions against these little race soldiers because one of the parents is a school board member. That does remind me of Columbine. We talked about that, Anyway, man, that's another one. many people think not all white people are racist. I do not. Many people, white privilege. That is not the problem. That's not even the correct, accurate word to describe that. That is power. While Jamal, you get the incorrect haircut. But you coming in here with locks. You got your dreaded locks. 6-day suspension. Meanwhile, Chad and Thad, they done terrorized the whole school and got us walking on, how they say it, got us walking on eggshells, metaphor. And they, mama on the school boys. What can you is that nepotism too? We talk about that? Is that nepotism again? Dang, with the white supremacy racism. Maybe that's the one you need to think about. That's the dreaded, usual double whammy. Got to think about that for your children. Yikes, if that's how they talk to the teacher, how do they think about my child, my 11 or 12-year-old child? And then double whammy if you're a black educator. Yikes, I didn't know that the 11-year-olds, they get to terrorize me and then they don't even do nothing about it. Man, and their mama on the school board. Dang, I don't look. How much y'all gonna pay me again? and then come with $20 an hour. You get $20 an hour. Like what? Man, school sucks. When we get Christmas vacations, school sucks. The number again, 605-313-5164. The code 564-943 pound. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. I'd be remiss. That Roger Golubski with Laura McDonald specifically, Laura McDonald suspected racist. We had a listener dial in weeks after that program. They said that was so important. I had never heard of this guy, and he's out raping black children and putting black people in greater confinement unjustly. Some of them still in greater confinement to this day. Now, I forgot about that. Ooh. Imagine you are a privileged black male. Golubski puts you in jail for decades, and then he kills himself, and you are, or he allegedly kills himself, and you are still in jail. Probably unjustly. Privileged indeed. But we had people who said that, and they called in a couple days, weeks after Laura McDonald was with us. And they said, man, I never heard of this, and I'm trying to share with other black people, black friends, black females. Like, man, did you hear about this? This dude is raping black children, black girls, and something. Blah, blah, blah. They listened to the program. He said, his black female buddy says, oh, my God, I'm not listening to this patriarchal, toxic, black male heathens podcast anymore. He called that white woman a bitch. I said, oh, my God, what, when, where? I said, what? And he said they had to go back and listen to the podcast again to confirm, oh, whoops, I made a false charge, just like some of those old no-count niggers that Golubski threw in jail. I guess he didn't call that good old white woman a bitch. My mouth was on the ground. Like, what? What? But, again, that's part of the middle fingers are up. We are estranged. VGQ, but I am not at all with the other individuals, even the ones who are classified as black, with 8 black grandparents, all born in Mississippi. I'm not cool. We are not working on the same problem. We're not in contact. None of the above. It is united independent. Ugh. Not all white people is racist. Well, fine. VGQ. 605-313-5164. The code 564-943 943-POUND. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. Let us see. Folks who dialed in with a hand up. Line should be open. Proceed.
Greetings, everyone. Greetings, Gus.
Retired firefighter in Florida.
Yes, sir. I would like to comment briefly on what you had just finished talking about all white people being racist. What was able for me to make my decision on that was the remembrance of a white male who was contracted out by Dade County Public Schools back when I was in the elementary school. And his name was Bill Hast, considered to be a snake expert. And he was contracted out by Dade County Public Schools because at that time, wild animals were still in close contact with people where they resided at. Therefore, there were children who would look at a coral snake with different colors and touch it and get bit and die, because it's very poisonous, that sort of thing. So he was contracted out by Dade County Public Schools to go to schools to talk to children about the dangers of snakes. And one of the slogans that he had stuck with me by him saying, "You are not a snake expert, so treat every snake as it being poisonous." That comment goes along with my reasoning understanding about global system of racist white supremacy and white people. I am not an expert on racism, white supremacy. I work at it, as far as studying, that sort of thing, having conversations, constructive conversations, but I'm not an expert on it. So therefore, my thoughts are that white people are racist. I haven't met anybody who was a white person that did not convince me that they were non-racist. And that's my thoughts on that. You mentioned something about seatbelts. I'm not 100% sure. About the idea of that is one of the, in my opinion, one of the probable causes that law enforcement would use to stop you. I've had this conversation with my offspring, with others, and being that a law enforcement official would be a white supremacist, they would be very codified on how they can manipulate a traffic stop in that way to ultimately get inside your car or in some kind of way maybe make you angry. And from there, they will go about the means of doing the things that we read about in the newspapers of a black person getting harmed. There's also some other cautions that a person needs to look over on their vehicle as far as the light that's supposed to light up your tag, so your tag can be seen at night. Your tag, that is important because you can get stopped for that also. Now I wasn't very safe with putting on seatbelts before I got on that job that you called me on this program about. But once I kept seeing over and over again people dying on automobile accidents, a lot of them did not have a seatbelt on, and they were thrown out of the vehicle, and in a lot of cases, the vehicle actually roll over them. In the process of the rolling, it motivated me very quickly to put a seatbelt on, because I've never cut a dead person out of a car that had a seatbelt on. I helped cut a lot of dead people out of cars or near cars, but none of them had seatbelts on. And that's all I have to say. Thanks for listening.
Much obliged, retired firefighter in Florida. I did, somewhere in the reservoir of my brain computer, I was thinking, it seemed like it might be a safety thing beyond, race soldiers stopping you to use their nigger knocker and such. Just maybe you might have that what they call fender bender, and might be good to keep your noggin from bouncing off the steering wheel and that sort of thing. That might also be an added benefit for the seatbelt. But I was trying to also be truthful. That wasn't really the main priority. The main priority was doing the small things that we can to minimize contact with racists. That was, the main component. But man, I do not want to be thrown out of the vehicle and have the vehicle roll on me. Sobering it. Hey, sobriety would be best. Be sober and buckled in. Like, hey, man, I'm doing as much as I can, man. Got my driver's license and everything. I'm doing all I can for holiday season. Our minor PSA for especially younger, I can't say that, especially younger, if you are 16, 17, 20, oh my God, bucking that would probably be equal both ways. Safety in terms of hitting a telephone pole and safety in terms of race soldier. Buckle up every time, no exception, and everybody in the vehicle for the exact same logic. Buckle up every time. Every time. Every time. Emphasize that if you have younger motorists, just start, and I would tell them both reasons. You don't want to, it's the law in a lot of places, so they should be hearing this when they're taking driver's ed and, all the rest of it. And then you don't want the car to roll over on top of you. Hopefully that never happens. Other folks who dialed in with a hand up, if you have commentary, proceed.
May I be heard?
Lauren, yes, ma'am.
Yes, sir. In answer to your question about wearing our seatbelt, I don't wear my seatbelt all the time. I should do better and start wearing it every time. That part you read out of Death of a Dark Nation from page 11, the book I have does not read that way. So I guess she made the edits, and it comes up on page 12 in my book, and it's pretty short. I can read it at the end if you would like, if you decide on that. For the segments that were played today, Bonnie Petrie, where she was talking, and I really like the segment she does on NPR a lot. But when she was talking about the CTE and the repeated hits to the head, and she listed sports, and then she also said domestic violence. And I think a lot of people don't think of domestic violence when they think about CTE, although I know one of the previous guests on this program actually talked about it. But yeah, we usually think of sports. Let me see. The Richard Hunt, the artist, the sculptor that died last December, I thought it was interesting. They said his largest sculpture was commissioned by McDonald's. That's pretty interesting. It also referenced the Moses story from the Bible. I guess Martin Luther King talked about that in a speech he gave called The Death of Evil. Let me see. You talked about already the white children at the middle school and the teacher, Miss Jones. The part that was super interesting to me at the end, they said, out of respect for privacy and dignity of the students, they said that's why they hadn't made any broad communication of their punishment or whatnot. So no respect for the dignity of the teacher in that situation, the black female. Dolores Madrigal, the lady who was the lead in the sterilization lawsuit, that whole time they were talking about sterilizing ladies. It said they were, it got them to sign forms during delivery of their babies. That is, I was going to say crazy, not crazy, profoundly incorrect. And the judge said it was a communication breakdown, and the culture of those particular women contributed to what happened. And also, I don't think they called the ladies non-white in that segment. They used the term Mexican. When you were talking about that movie, not you, the segment, The Order, when they were talking about the movie, The Order, I thought about that. Order, it means organization, but it also has a religious context, a feel to that word, like an order of priests. So that made me think of the religion of racism, white supremacy. Also, when they were talking about that movie, it said Bob Matthews in the movie, he was teaching his son, training his 5-year-old to shoot a gun. White people do things like this. I am not saying no black person has ever instructed their child to shoot a gun, but 5 years old seems pretty young. And, when your child goes and shoots up a school after that, I just don't even see how that could be a surprise. Let me see. The open AI, using technology for warfare purposes, that was interesting. And also during the last couple of weeks, although I did hear about it in the last week, they redid an NPR article. But on NPR, they said that there was eyewitnesses. The people in the area of the world called Israel are using sniper drones to kill the non-white people in the area of the world called Palestine. These quadcopters will come around, shoot someone in the head, and then when other non-white people come to assist the person that was shot, the drone will shoot them in the head too. And this is happening quite often. People are talking about it a lot. They're shooting children in the head, and then they're showing up at the hospitals. I didn't even know that was a thing until I heard it on NPR, that they're using these sniper drones to shoot people in the head or wherever in their body, but they were mostly headshots, what I heard of. The lady, A.J. Owens, I hope I'm saying her name correctly, her mother was speaking today, and she was talking about that her grandson said he's no longer scared of Susan. I guess that's the white woman who killed his mother. And, okay, I guess. But I think it makes sense to have intelligent fear of white people. Mr. Fuller gave a definition of that term in the word guide, and he said, use this term to apply to the fear that a non-white person has of a white supremacist, racist, while that non-white person is speaking and or acting to replace a system of racism with a system of justice, balance between people. Intelligent fear is a form of cautious and calculated courage. I guess I just wanted to share that. Roger Golubski, the charges against him were dismissed, and I think that's really important. I'm not sure if they had to do that because he was dead, but that's interesting. Those charges were dismissed, and the lawyer, he said, Golubski's lawyer said he was despondent over the media coverage, and that was right at the beginning of the segment. And I was wondering if the people who put that segment together were trying to get people to feel sorry for Roger Golubski. And also, when Nico Quinn came on, he didn't just call her by her name. He said Nico Quinn once gave false testimony. Like, that's how he introduced her. And okay, she gave some false testimony, but white people made her do that. And I think that was the incorrect way to introduce her on the program. Somebody else, that was Nico Quinn in that one. She was talking about white people placed in leadership positions. She said, you guys are not placed in your position by design. I think that's what she said. If she said you're not placed in your position by design, I don't think that's true. I think white people are placed in leadership positions by design. She also brought up Moses, the Bible story, second time that came up in the broadcast. And I appreciated that she said, quit calling them prostitutes, crackheads. These women have names. These victims don't have headstones. Why not let them rest? Place their name on their graves so we know who they were. I don't remember which word she said, but I think that was really important because a lot of people are dead because of Roger Golubski, and I don't know if people are thinking about that. They're just thinking about the charges that were put on him. Let me see. Also, I read an article. No, it was on NPR, and it said brain rot was the word of the year. And they use that term to describe the deterioration of a person's mental state due to overconsumption of a lot of low-quality content like the internet and social media. And they also said it had been used previously to talk about consuming TV and video games. That was referenced. And also in the Congo, this was in The Guardian, there's a disease. They don't have a name for it yet. They're calling it a flu-like disease. They said it's killing people. When I saw it a couple of days ago, it was like 70-something people that were dead. And I just checked today, and it said 143 people are dead so far. And they said the symptoms are fever and headache, and people are dying at home for lack of medical treatment. That's all I have for now. Thank you for allowing me to speak.
I guess let's hear the edit from Trojan Horse, Death of a Dark Nation, our little ode to Pamela Evans Harris. So in your edition, you said it, I guess, got moved to page 12 in the text. What does she say?
Page 12, question. Aren't some white people opposed to racism? Answer. Only if they are saying and doing something to oppose it. For example, John Brown, a white male, encouraged armed insurrections by slaves as a means to end slavery, and as a result was charged with treason and hanged. However, that does not mean John Brown did not practice racism at an earlier time or would not have practiced it at a later time had he lived. And then it says, question, what about the white anti-racist activists who speak out against, I think that's a typo, against racism? Aren't they opposed to white supremacy? Answer, the self-anointed white anti-racist activists offer little more than lip service. They sacrifice nothing, take no risks, and reap more financial rewards than the black activists fighting in the real trenches. The white anti-racist actually creates more confusion by creating the false illusion that the devastated black masses can be liberated from racism by sitting in an auditorium or conference room, listening to a white person making anti-racism speeches while still enjoying their white privileges. It is unlikely that the same white anti-racist activists who profit from writing books and giving speeches about racism have any real desire or intent to destroy the same white supremacy system that allows them to oppose it without losing a single white privilege. There may be whites who sincerely want to replace the system of white supremacy with a system of justice, but that number is so statistically small it is insignificant. That's all I have.
Wow. Editing. Pamela Evans Harris, Trojan Horse, Death of a Dark Nation. Now, I will say for the record, I do have an edited copy of that book. Pamela Evans Harris talked about the edit, how it all happened over a number of broadcasts. even during which we were talking about Tim Wise on one of those programs where a non-white person dialed in to say, well, Gus T, I think people would listen to your program and conclude the way to end racism is for non-white people to have sex with white people. What? Estranged from C.O.W.S listeners. Anyway, massive edit. Thank you for sharing, Lauren. I thought it was important too, the segment where they spoke about the non-white victim Dolores Madrigal. They did not reference her being non-white. And that's what all of that man, I was just at Stanford, man. Eugenics, William Shockley. That's it exact. And the state of California in that same time period too. They, along with Virginia, they sterilized the most people in this part of the world from like the 1940s, right after, during and after World War II, all the way up to the midpoint of the 1970s, right edge of Jonestown, where Jonestown was, in fact, L.A. and all that. Anyway, but yeah, I thought that was super important. They did not emphasize because that's who they were targeting. They did sterilize a number of white people as well during this campaign, but especially after World War II, it increasingly targeted non-white people like Elaine Reddick. We had her son, black male, as a guest on the program, 2012. They talked about how they sterilized her. I think she was like 17. She was really young when they sterilized her. She was a black female, North Carolina. Same thing. That major, because that moves away from that being a whole program of white supremacy, racism, medical apartheid. That's another one you can mention. Non-white people are a little hesitant about COVID-19 and vaccine and all that. Anyway, other folks who dialed in, commentary to share, *61, number again is 605-313-5164, the code 564943, pound, press *61 if you would like to participate.
Can I be heard?
Non-Clemson dad, yes sir.
Hello everyone, hope everyone is having a wonderful evening. All right, I wrote a couple things from this broadcast and through the week. I've never been pulled over for a seatbelt. I put my seatbelt on before I start the car. I've been stopped as a black male in the car, and so is my wife. And I've been stopped and frisked by the police in NYC twice in 10 minutes. That happened back when I was about 19 or 20 years old. I didn't hear about Roger Golubski until he was talked about on the cows. I questioned charges being dismissed. I have professional work certification. If I get accused of a crime and quit my job, the investigation continues, though I believe cops and elected officials can escape investigation if they quit or resign their position. Roger Golubski reminds me of the DA over the Ahmaud Arbery case, Jackie Johnson, whose trial has no ETA because her selected defense attorney has too much work to prepare a defense for the former DA, Jackie Johnson. I've not been keeping up with the book club. Nevertheless, it's not the first time I've heard black Africans say black Africans are more problematic than white people. This includes people in my family, as I am of Nigerian descent. I tell friends and family I don't have white friends. They usually respond, not all white people are bad. I'm happy to say that not all, how did I write that? I'm happy that none of the people in my family, friends and family, have accused me of being a racist, but some have asked. My wife, daughter, and I just returned from NYC this evening. While at NYC, I took my black male mentee to Central Park to ride bikes. The person who was renting us the bikes brought up how there was a shooting not too far from Central Park, the United Healthcare CEO, earlier that day. Personally, I don't care, but I responded, I don't know what you're talking about. At that point, I didn't make the connection that the CEO was who he was referencing. What I personally find interesting about this case, and maybe other people have seen, is that there's been multiple postings on social media, so much so that articles have been written that people do not care and are unempathetic of the white male CEO getting killed near Central Park because of how insurance companies, health insurance companies, are constantly delaying services when people need them. And with that, I'll mute my line.
I was thinking the same thing, non-Clemson dad, when he said they were riding bikes in Central Park. I was like, oh my God, they had the dragnet up there. Like they're trying to find this white killer, white assassin, white man with a gun in Central Park. That's where they, think he escaped and dumped his backpack and all the rest of it. Like, wow, did y'all see the task force and everything else? He said it took him a while to get it. And I have seen that as well. Reports saying that people, I guess lots of people are frustrated with the insurance industry and felt like, they have. In fact, I saw this week where they were still talking about Hurricane Katrina and saying that there was a multi-million-dollar settlement where one of the insurance companies, that is 20 years of delaying and fabricating and all the rest of it. And nope, you've been wronging these people and you're going to have to pay up. Now, how many people have died and stress and everything that else could happen over 20 years of being denied a rightful claim? Hurricane Katrina, man, and the levee failure and everything else, looters. But I saw that as well, where they said it was lots of folks who did not seem like they were empathizing with this white man who was shot and killed, and a white killer on the loose. Now, I think that might have been different, too, if the shooter had been someone non-white, especially if it had been a black male. Like, I think it would have been different. I'll just say that. But, yes, I've seen that, where they've said people seem like they're not sympathizing. And even I've seen reports that they've talked about, like, wow, the shooter, they're so handsome. And talking about what white movie stars the shooter looks like. This dude shot him in the back, like the cowardice of it all. Like, he didn't even confront him face to face, like, count and you denied my claim, none of it. Like, he shot him in the back. Like, that, how cowardly that's Dylan, Reb, Columbine, shoot somebody in the back. Anyway, yes, I did see all of that, and they said they had like a heavy police presence at Central Park. Like, man, I would have felt some type of way about even. Did it seem like a heavy police? I know you don't live there regularly, but did it seem like it was a lot of police presence when you all were there?
Not any more than usual. Just, me and my wife, we went all over. Well, not all over New York City. We were mostly in Manhattan, and one trip for me to Brooklyn. But for the most part, the cops that I saw were the regular cops that you're going to see in New York City at this point. Also, the man who allegedly shot the CEO, apparently this man absconded so impressively that they have now increased it to a nationwide manhunt. They can't find this man. Apparently, he is Houdini.
White people. I did see that. They said that they think he left New York City via a bus, and who knows where he is. They said he think he left the bus that was an interstate bus. So, yep, who knows where he is at this point. White assassins. And hey, white people, I told you they're talking about how attractive he is and all the rest of it. Like us now, if this person looked like Al Sharpton, we did hear from Reverend Al during the segment, or Ahmaud Arbery. Let's see. Oh, I was going to say briefly, I think that is a common one, that the Africans are the problem, not the. See, they say that in a lot of. They say we got these old pretend black people. They are the problem. And you go to the continent, they say, see, the Africans, they are the problem. Hey, the problem is white people. I posted today also the Dr. Welsing archives, and I posted about the strange, they called it mystery disease in the Congo. I was like, wow, they don't have no good news in the Congo at all. It's never anything good. Like, ever since Muhammad Ali and George Foreman left, it's been downhill Since then, oh, this is in the New York Times today. Medical mystery offers clues to the monkeypox epidemic. And they got suffering black people with biohazard material on the cover of it. Ooh, that's what I mean. If the shooter had looked like these black people on the Congo, different response, I think. Totally different. Even probably way more empathy, even though a lot of folks apparently are upset with the insurance industry, and rightfully so. Ooh, not going to tolerate no colored folks going out here shooting down a white and shooting them in the back. Let's see. Other folks who dialed in with a hand up. Caller 9029. Commentary to share. Proceed.
Greetings, Gus. Greetings, callers and listeners. Really to what everybody was speaking about in regards to, well, a couple of things, but the one thing was really the safety around this time of the year, and especially the caller that just spoke, especially in New York City, the metropolitan area, should just really be cautious coming in and out, because they're not only are the police looking to rack up their numbers so they can make more money for the city and, of course, get more revenue, but also it's a situation where, and speaking from experience this time of the year, I've gotten pulled over for literally everything everybody has said except for a seatbelt. I've always had my seatbelt on, but tail light, swerving, oh, we saw you swerving, and all types of nonsense. We heard gunshots in the area, so we pulled you guys over, like weird things that made absolutely no sense to us at the time because we know we weren't doing it. And I'd say I've had guns drawn on me 3 times in my life. And out of those 3 times, 2 of them were by police officers. And obviously me being on the phone, and I've never gotten hurt or shot in any form or manner. But I can tell you distinctly that it is a dangerous time to come in and out of the city. And you should definitely be careful with that. As the other commentary about non-white people being the problem, it's one of the biggest issues I've noticed within my personal family, and I try to stay away from that conversation. I had that, I mistakenly had that conversation at Memorial Day this year, and let's just say I will just walk out of the room the next time I hear people within my family or in any group, no matter, just speaking and going, it's these, as they would say, the niggers are the problem, the niggers are the problem. And it's difficult to listen to it because the first thought in my head is what makes you so different and what makes you think white people think you're different. But it's a tough conversation to have. And I'm going to now stay away from it, but I did make that mistake and I interjected, and boy, it was just complete yelling. Nobody was listening to each other. So those are the 2 things that definitely happened. As far as the shooting of the healthcare individual, the director, the president, I don't know if you probably didn't see the news, but the news out here, I believe it was one of the chiefs. I have to be specific about it. I can't tell you specifically, though. They were speaking in the news report, and they said, oh, yes, it's a light-skinned male. And immediately the alert in my head went off when you say light-skinned male, you're not saying a white male. You're saying a light-skinned male. And immediately other people that I knew pointed it out and said, how come he's not saying it's a white male instead of saying it's a light-skinned male, as if it's a non-white person that's light-skinned? It was really interesting, but that was something that we caught in the news, because even within the writing, they practice racism as well as when they're speaking to the general public. But again, the PSA, definitely important. And I think one thing I'd like to say in general is if you're looking to do something as far as health is concerned and do the right thing with yourself as far as physically and spiritually and mentally, don't wait until the new year to do it. Just start doing it now. And be careful with the overconsumption of everything. around this time of year. I'd say all the way up until Valentine's Day, to be quite honest. That's pretty much all I have to say. Thank you. I'll mute my line.
It wouldn't be December if I didn't have, 15 pieces of cobbler and, 25 ham biscuits and, 15 pounds of chitlins. I mean, we got to nibble and buffet and party and chomp, 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 munch, 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 munch. Come on. Especially the sweets. I posted, man, they had a report in the LA Times. I think I was still in California when I do read the LA Times every day, but I mean, of course, I read the LA Times every day when I was in California. But they had a report, I think it was like front page too. It showed a whole bunch of black people, which, suspicious immediately, but it was a whole bunch of black people, all or most of them like obese, not, just that they had a little bit of weight on them or what have you, but I mean like to a point where this would be unhealthy. This would be a health issue. You are substantially over what would be a healthy weight for you. And they were eating, and even beyond that, even if everybody had been super healthy, great shape for their age and everything, like they're fit and they eat lots of fruits and veggies and drink their water and exercise and all that good stuff, regardless, the whole table was just white flour and sugar. Cakes, pies, cobblers, everything. I was like, dang, like it's no vegetables, nothing. What I said at the beginning, like, dang, if we're going to do this, maybe we don't have to give food, so we're all going to have diabetes. And it was practically no black males in the image. I said they probably all got diabetes and died. That's the overconsumption. Like, no, we do not already heard, because it started way back with, October. They warm you up when they got to stuff 15 pounds of Tootsie Rolls on you. Now we get here, and I was hearing folks, they said, yeah, we had apple cobbler and the turnovers, and they made a pound cake, and what's the rum cake? That's it, the rum cake. That's the one for that. We got the rum cake. I was like, dang, you got all of those? Like, why do you need 15 desserts? Like, what in the world? Like, is it 100 people there? Like, what? Come on, man. All that sugar? Come on, man. Come on. Get some veggies, fruit. That's why I said, like, get some healthier recipes. Even if we're going to do dessert, hey, man, get that blender. We're going to make some plant-based desserts, plant-based ice cream, all that. Pick out some, great flavor. I told you I had that pistachio blueberry milkshake. Amazing. That is major one, especially because you have folks who are you have a lot of people who end up being depressed, upset, stressed, spend all that money or whatever, didn't get the bonus that they wanted or whatever. But it is a stressful time for or they have to work a lot of hours, or might be seasonal work. It's lots of reasons. Lots of people are under a lot of stress this time of year for lots of different reasons. That alone, you can munchin'. Watch all that this time of year. And it's dark, too, because it's the weather. A lot of places it's cold, so you just end up staying inside. You can't get outside for people that would be active and would get outside and, go hiking or running or whatever. Get some exercise, and you get stuck because it's cold, snowing, and the sun isn't. Even the days the sun is out, it gets dark all early now. Be very mindful of all of that this time of year. That's why I said at work especially, like, I am not eating, at least I know in this environment, it's not like they're going to have gourmet, vegan, organic, prepared food right in front. Like, come on, I'm good. Much of it, we got lots of folks with the PSA about wearing their seatbelt. Like I said, I just think for minimizing contact with enforcement officers, but certainly, could be lots of inebriated drivers this time of year. None of them cows listeners, of course, but that would also be great reason. Wear your seatbelt and remind, if you have younger motorists, remind them. Buckle up. Oh man, we did our full 3 hour shots. Time's rolling. doing my gabbing at the beginning. Shout out to the late Pamela Evans Harris, not forgotten Trojan horse. That is wow, what a difference. Wowzers. Anywho, reading more important than watching television. Again, you can check on social media if you're interested. I posted lots of articles, older articles of Dr. Frances Cress Welsing, which I've done for a long time. But since my Cal Berkeley access continues, I will continue to do my California looting. Dr. Welsing articles from 1955, before Emmett Till was lynched. That would have been one to ask her about. I'm like, do you remember this? Like, this was before. Wow, what were you thinking during, the springtime and the spring before Emmett Till was murdered? What were you thinking? What was on your brain computer? And, anyway, check the newspaper, even historically, to see things that have happened previously. It can be very informative in terms of things that are happening right now. Pattern recognition, just having a better understanding of racism, white supremacy. That's it. Oh, before we wrap I did the order, that segment. I did see the order at the film festival in Los Angeles. Again, I had my chest out, stand by your work, proud. Why? We read the Turner Diaries like way back. That is the third book ever that we read in the Cows Book Club that now has been in existence, a dozen years? All of the heaps of books that we have read, and that was the third book we read. Like somebody thought that was an important book to read. Indeed. And I told you I wigged out. These race soldiers are killing white people and robbing banks in Washington State. Then they moved down to, I did know about this prior to the movie. I'm not saying I'm an expert by any stretch. I need to do more research, but I did know about this part of Washington State history, and certainly the Turner Diaries. I did not know they went to Ukiah to rob a bank. What? Man, I could have lost it for Devontae Hart, People's Temple. Man. Mendocino Farms. Anyway, we will be back this week continuing collating all of the information that I didn't even realize how much material that I had on Patrice Lumumba and Andre Blum specific, how much material white people gathered on Andre Blum. It is staggering. Wow. When you are on white people's radar, wow, they can devote all kinds of time, and whole teams of white people, that's their job, just to study you. Amazing. In lieu of that, the California trip continues to just get better and easily remains the best travel experience of Gus T's life. And it could get better. In fact, I have confidence it will get better. It got better, within within about 10 days or so of me being back. I got all 4 audio MP3s of Dr. Welsing and William Shockley. Now, I hadn't heard these before. I didn't even know what they were. I just saw them audio. It was written out enough to where I knew it was some sort of audio recording where Dr. Welsing was on this. Oh my God. I haven't even listened to them all. I was stunned to get them so quickly. Then when I got them, my confidence went up from like 30% to like 60%. Those 20 documentaries on Jonestown, I am going to get them. I have never had the experience of there being 20 documentaries that I've never seen on a subject that I am intensely interested in, and someone drops 20 documentaries. Some of them are 3 hours on this subject. My confidence went from about 30% to 60%. That is going to happen. I'm going to have to clear out a lot of binge watching time. I'm so excited. Well, that notwithstanding, I didn't even listen to the audio at first because I was so stunned. It all arrived at one time. It's like, what? Whoa, that was so fast. I was thinking it was going to take much longer, but though I did remember the white librarian said the audio doesn't take as long as the video. They'll probably get this done quickly. And they did. The teaspoon that I listened to. Wow. One, I didn't know that Dr. Welsing and William Shockley had multiple recorded exchanges. Wow. Still learning. Dr. Shockley gets on his roll and Dr. Welsing tries to bring up Adolf Hitler in conjunction with Dr. Shockley's views, and they kept interrupting her, much like Cal's listeners do, Gus T. They kept interrupting her when she did this. The third time, she would not allow them to interrupt her. She brought up Snowflake, the albino gorilla, and a test where white people were comparing the intelligence of Snowflake to a melanated ape. And then she pointed out that the black Negro gorilla beat Snowflake on all of the tests. And she said it would have never occurred to her brain computer, and that's what she said, would have never occurred to her brain computer to even do such a test, and who is smarter. And she says that is the exact same logic of Dr. I was stuffed. Dr. Welsing, the greatest in the world. That was the time. She said, no, you're not going to interrupt me again. That is the same logic of Adolf Hitler. That is the same logic of why you got to be testing Snowflake, who is smarter, Snowflake or the nigger chimp, and then have Dr. Shockley come say the exact same thing. Dr. Francis Cress, and I knew that was there. I didn't know it was audio, but I knew before I left Washington, you have got to go through the William Shockley box, Dr. Welsing's nemesis. You have got to, and that was the last day I was there at Stanford, not in California. Last day, last request, exactly as planned. I said that should be after you've done all the Jonestown work. Make sure you go through the William Shockley last. Wow. Dr. Francis Cress. And these appear to be Dr. Shockley's personal recordings. This seems not to be like the studio recorded, although that could be. This very much seems like this could be like Dr. Shockley had a recorder going to keep a record of, man. White people are not, while we're saying not all white people are right, shit. White people are not ignorant about race. They got boxes, probably on Dr. Welsing, Andre Bloom, Neely Fuller, Patrice Lumumba, boxes. Boxes. It just goes on forever. At the university, what I said, William Shockley, eugenics, that was what the whole university was about. We had that book, Palo Alto. I saw that book while I was in Palo Alto. That is what the whole book is about. They mentioned with Dr. Jennifer Doudna, CRISPR, that's who Dr. Welsing was talking about. The white woman who felt like a freak growing up in Hawaii, was tall and pale. That's Dr. Jennifer Doudna. I nearly fell out. They said she was at Cal Berkeley. I was just there. Broadcasted from there. Got data. That's where I got the book Guyana Murders. Man, signals from the Creator continue. And they went to the farmer's market. I went to the farmer's market repeatedly. Can't believe it. We will be back this week going through Man, I didn't even listen to all the audio. I didn't even listen to all the audio. Man, one and only Dr. Francis Cress Welsing. Period. That's another. I guess stand by my work. 31-time guest. Man, context of white supremacy. Sobriety would be best under conditions of white supremacy racism. Wear your seatbelt, I guess. Yes, wear your seatbelt. I say, hey, we want to try to minimize contact with race soldiers, but hey, a retired firefighter, I have never had to pry someone out of a vehicle who was wearing a seatbelt. Well, yes, sir. Buckle up. Creator, we ask that you help us remain patient with other black people, victims of white supremacy. Even the Africans who are enemies of Africa, even the Africans who are enemies of Africa. Help us be patient with ourselves. Remind us to demonstrate the highest levels of black self-respect at all times, in all places, each and every time we are in contact with another black person. It has been time. Replace white supremacy with justice immediately. No name calling black people. Pamela Evans Harris. Not forgotten. Kyle signing out. Thanks all for tuning in.
Nigga, you so brainwashed. I'm a victim, brother. No problem. You're a victim. I'm a victim of 400 years of conditioning. Shut up. The man has programmed my conditioning. Even my conditioning has been conditioned.